holy picture. It's got all the trappings of what we mean by religion. And I think because in our culture, where there's a lot of cynicism about religion, sort of, we used to take it seriously probably a few centuries ago. There was really only religion, you almost be hanged or burned at the stake if you weren't religious, if you didn't believe in a creator. But now we're in a world where there's an immense amount of people who have the philosophy, what we call, philosophical materialism. That's their view, So, and then there's a lot of cynicism about religion, especially all the more these days when religious people behave badly. So as soon as we see the trappings of religion, we get very nervous. And this is one of the things, so this is what His Holiness says, and it's really all these years saying, and this is where Lama Yeshe from the 60s, first meeting hippies, because what's hidden to us, unless we really look at it, and we get this from His Holiness, we got that from Lama Yeshe, that if you get past that packaging, it's all there, and it's got logic to it, actually, when you understand it. But the essence of being a Buddhist, the point of being a Buddhist, the work of being a Buddhist, fundamentally is being your own, as Lama Yeshe puts it, being your own therapist. I mean, it sounds like good marketing, and it is, but it's literally true. And this maybe is a surprise to us. I mean, the best we can think of in our culture, when we think of Buddhism, we think, oh, mindfulness, so lots of, now it's in psychology and it's acceptable, but it's nothing wrong with it. But I mean, first of all, there's 47 varieties. It's practically its own religion now, and that's okay. Buddha's not a creator. He doesn't own it. He's got no copyright on it. But if we want to understand the source of it, we need to understand exactly Buddhist psychology. And it's really surprising to us initially, I think, us in the West, because we're not used to thinking that Buddha's expertise is the mind. So as His Holiness said, now it's becoming more and more well known that the amazing views that have been around for 2,500, 3,000 years coming from India. What did we know about India? I mean, I always joke and say it in our culture, we Judeo-Christians, we track ourselves back to the Greeks. We think they're wonderful. You note all our fancy words are always in Greek, As soon as it's every word, psychology, look at it, it means just the mind, right? Knowing about the mind. So what we know nothing about India, and it's only really now with His Holiness, as he said last night, 60 years in exile, unbelievable, where he's hugely impacted, unbelievably so on the West. We can see this, the scientific world, the psychological world, the religious world, the political world. He's extraordinary impact. So because of his presence, more and more now we're learning, and scientists and intelligent, the thinkers of our world are now, verifying this astonishing system that existed, first Buddha, 2,500 years, but the system before him. I mean, I always quote this lately, all the time I quote it. As His Holiness was these Indians, amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago, who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. I mean, the work they did too wasn't in the brain, believe me, it was on the mind, the actual cognitive process itself about the mind. This is the mind. So to unravel our emotions is the job. It is the job, but not just that. The beginning of the work that's the job of being a Buddhist. And Buddha's expertise is the mind. The mind is absolutely central in the entirety of Buddhism, Buddhist metaphysics, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist religion, Buddhist psychology, Buddhist philosophy, you name it. The mind is the fundamental thing from beginning to end. I mean, it's one of the least, I think in our world, psychology is one of the least rigorous, isn't it, of the fields of inquiry. Because we don't trust this internal subjective cognitive process. We want our hard sciences, so that's why neuroscience is the top when it comes to the mind. But for the Buddha, his expertise is not the brain. You ask those dudes back then, these genius Indians, even before the Buddha. Oh, sorry. What happened? I was getting a call. Okay, sorry. It's the thing. So in order to understand this, how his expertise is not the brain, we absolutely have to understand what the Buddha means by the mind. And I mean, if we've heard these teachings once or 1,000 times, we need to keep hearing it, because the words are simple enough, but like all bodies of knowledge, you start with the beginning and then you keep repeating it. Practice makes perfect. We know this, So what is the mind then? And how do we unravel our emotions? And the most fundamental question, why should we? Why should we? Why should we? This is the point, okay? Well, a really profoundly simple way, a profound and a simple way to know why is to hear the meaning of the etymology of the word Buddha itself. So the end result of all this work we do as a Buddhist, if we choose to be a Buddhist, is to become a Buddha, is to turn ourselves into a Buddha. If you want to study music, you become a Bach. If you're going to become a mathematician, you start at the beginning, you go through the stages, and then you become that yourself. You become your own Bach, your own Einstein, your own Roger Federer, if it's tennis. So here we're becoming our own Buddha. So what's that word mean? It's deceptively, it's simple but profound, and it tells us, it implies the entire job. When we get this, then we can keep on track in understanding what practice means, because one of the things we can really see, especially Tibetan Buddhism, which is so vast and extensive and seemingly complex, we get completely lost. The commonest question we ask is, what is it? Where do I start? When we understand the job that we have to do from beginning to end, from A to Z, is on the mind. This is it. So the word Buddha is incredible, so simple, so practical. And the Tibetan equivalent, same. The etymology is delicious. Sang, or Bud, first syllable, implies the total eradication, the utter eradication from one's mind, oneself, one's being, one's mind in particular, of all ego, all fears, all neuroses, all depression, anxiety, attachment, jealousy, you name it, the stuff that we are intimately familiar with. This is already so shocking. This concept is so shocking, which is why we put it into the realm of religion, because it doesn't seem real, You go to your therapist and you say, can you please give me methods to get rid of all ego, all fears, all jealousy, all depression forever? They would laugh. They would not laugh. They'd feel very, very shocked for you and give you a pill to calm you down. Because there is no view like that. I mean, if we think the mind is the brain, not being rude here, if we think brain and mind are synonymous, not for the Buddha, he's not arguing you've got a brain. Of course we've got a brain. But it's not the mind for the Buddha. It's a physical thing that has a relationship with the mind. There's no question. And maybe for me, I'd like to perhaps say that it's a physical indicator of what's going on in the mind, at least at a gross level. If we think that you can rid the mind of all the delusions, when we tried doing that back in the 1930s, we called it lobotomy. Didn't work, did it? We turned people into veggies. So Buddha's view of the mind already is completely different, right there. Not only Bud can we rid the mind of all the rubbish, but Da, Sangye, we can develop to perfection everything else in the mind. Love, wisdom, kindness, bliss, joy, compassion. These words are literal. And this, again, is not what we're used to when it comes to spiritual teachings. We think spiritual teachings are all kind of this wonderful, experiential, you get a feeling, you get all excited. And we don't take the words seriously. We don't give any rigor to their meaning. I mean, if this were cooking class, we'd have our notes down and we'd be, please repeat that recipe. Exactly what was that? 1 teaspoon or 1 1/4 teaspoon? We'd be precise, we'd be clear, we'd be logical, we'd be having intellectual rigor. That's the way Buddhism approaches it. It's a big surprise to us. It's a big surprise to us. We do not think of spiritual teachings like that. Absolutely. This is the Buddhist approach. The same level of clarity and analysis and rigor and depth and precision and discipline that we need just to make a cake, for goodness sake, is exactly what we need to do this job the Buddha says we can accomplish. Become a Buddha. Rid the mind of all the rubbish, grow all the goodness. So right there, it tells us the job. That's the end result. That tells us then the methodology. So from beginning to end, everything you would do in Buddhism, even though it might not look like it's got anything to do with the mind, it's a technique to help you do this actual job of ridding the mind of the rubbish and growing the goodness. That's it, bottom line. In fact, Tsongkhapa, in one of his lovely Lam Rim texts, the hymns of experience, is very poetic text, the hymns of experience. And he says something, he says in there, in all the teachings are to be taken as sound advice, because there's no contradiction between scripture and practice. Well, if this were a cookbook that we are talking about, you would say all the words, all the recipe, all the words in this book are doable. They're advice. Think of it, they're advice. Because there's no contradiction between every one of these recipes and the cake. Think of the meaning. And we're so familiar with that idea, that's what we call science. It's an instruction manual of how to get a cake. Well, every word in Buddhism, if it's valid, and you should check, because we think it's religion, we think anyone can make up their own ideas about it. We don't think there's any rigor or clarity. We don't check. We read any old book. Someone does a weekend course. They have a vision. They write a damn book about it. It's so disgraceful. It's so kind of arrogant. That's us in our culture. If it is valid Buddhism, there would not be one practice, one philosophical concept, not one single psychological idea, not any of the metaphysics. There wouldn't be any part of it, not even a phrase, not even a comma, not even a full stop that doesn't play a role in giving practical advice that is doable by you to get the end result of achieving Buddha. It's exactly what we understand as science. So it's a shock to hear it so bluntly when it comes to spiritual. Is the approach, So we have to remember this. So, okay. Then Buddha, rid of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness. So even the question there is, well, that's pretty interesting. I can get rid of all the rubbish. That's pretty amazing. But again, you ask the question, why should I? Because this idea is so shocking. So shocking. I remember, when you first hear this, especially from our culture, where we give equal status to all these parts of our mind, don't we? In other words, for our views, our neuroscience and our psychiatry and our psychology, without exception in all the different views in the philosophical materialist world, we give equal status to all this stuff, meaning that a normal person would have some of all of these. And in other words, you'd be weird if you didn't. In other words, we give equal status to anger and depression and jealousy and love and compassion and kindness and intelligence. We all kind of know, hopefully, that we'd have some more of the nicer sounding ones and the ugly stuff because we'd like that, we'd hope that. But there's no view as radical as Buddha's, as outrageous as Buddha's, that is coming from direct experience, that someone has proven that you can rid the mind of all the rubbish. This is pretty astonishing. So this is how we have to take it. And this is when we understand again, repeat this. Even if we're Buddhists for 35 years, we forget, how to listen to Buddha, how to approach. We know as soon as it's called science, we have our thinker's hat on. We have our intelligent hat on. We know that when Einstein tells us about relativity, he's not shoving it down our throats. We know he didn't have a vision or a dream about it. We know he's not demanding we believe him. But that's what we think as soon as we hear the word spiritual. So we need to be very rigorous in our own mind and analyze all our assumptions, We all ask the same questions, I swear to you, all over the planet. But there's one question I've only ever had once. I always quote this. A scientist in New Zealand years ago, 20 years ago, in Nelson, New Zealand. It was very incredible. It was a question. It was so perfect. He said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? It's a perfect question when it comes to what we understand as spiritual, which is religion, meaning where you posit a creator, a person, a being, a superior being who's always existed, who doesn't have a cause, and who is the source of the universe, the source of the rules, the source of me. So by definition, those teachings are revelation. Of course, it would make sense. So he was shocked when I said, because he's a scientist, when I said, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings about relativity to you, Einstein? We all laughed, of course. But this is exactly the point. There are levels of as you progress in Buddhism, as you progress developing the subtle levels of your mind, we'll talk about this, which Buddha asserts as existing, and all the techniques enable us to get these subtler states of mind. And this is a radical difference in Buddha's view of the mind, that's got these far more subtle states of cognition. When we posit that, then we'll understand that every single thing that Buddha's saying, for example, he asserts that consciousness is not physical, right there, that first point. So straight away, we'll just laugh at that. What are you talking about? And how can you prove that anyway? Then we'll say, well, and Buddha says, you're not created. He won't even say there's no such thing as a creator. He'd say that's a misconception. He's not being rude. That's his observation. He's saying that you're not the handiwork of your mother and father. Your body is, but your mind ain't, baby. Your mind is not the brain. Your mind is not the body. He's all these different views. He's got the view about karma. We'll talk about all this. That every single thing you think and do and say programs you, sows seeds in your mind that produces your future experiences. We're our own creator, as Robina says. Buddha says all this. That's his views. So this, obviously, hearing this scientist said, well, who revealed all this to the Buddha? It's a very brilliant question, actually. Where did it all come from? It's a very excellent question. But his assumption, being religion, is it's a revelation coming from a being above the Buddha. That's the point. No, I mean, there are levels of, if you like, knowledge that you can accomplish at a subtler level. You can call it revelation. You have a dream. I mean, people talk about the dreams and the Dalai Lama. And one little boy said, somebody he was asked, have you met the Dalai Lama? He said, no, but he comes and teaches me in my dreams. There's a possibility. You call that revelation if you like. He's sitting there and the Dalai Lama teaches him in his dream, But the point is, the Buddhist approach is exactly the same. And I'm not being sarcastic or cynical or sneaky. It's identical to the approach of discovering the truth or not of relativity. First, you go to Einstein's class, and you've heard about this fellow. You've heard about Buddha. So you go check out. Initially, who's heard of E equals MC squared? Let's say no one, Oh, that's interesting. So like I said before, because he's a scientist. I mean, you know already what that means is he's observed the world with his mind. He's observed the universe as it is. He hasn't added anything to the world. This is a major point to understand. This is the meaning of natural law. With his intelligence, he's observed the universe as it is. He hasn't made up something and then plonked it on the universe. That's what a creator does. A creator makes the universe. But a scientist is a person who observes it. That's Buddha. That's Buddha, exactly. He has taken everything he has seen, and of course he's got a subtle level of mind. He says we can all achieve it, that can see phenomena subtler than we can with our sensory and our intellectual. And he's presented his findings about how it exists. That's it. And he says, this is my methodology, and this is the result. The point is that this is a major difference. I think this is a major difference. This is a massive, major, crucial difference to understand. One way of describing all of the entire Buddhist path is in terms of its being a method to get happy and stop suffering. That we like that. Another way of presenting it is a method of stopping ignorance and getting wisdom. That we understand. And that's what we mean by science. I'm ignorant now. I know nothing about math. I'm going to get some wisdom. So I go and I engage. I check out Einstein. He sounds reasonable. He's got a good reputation. People say that other people have doing the work of proving that relativity is right. So I enter into junior school and I start to learn that 1 + 1 is 2. And I know each step of the way, I will do the work. And I'll prove it to be true. And as I keep going, I'll get more and more brilliant, more and more wise, less and less ignorant, more and more wise. I'll be able to know the whole universe of physics if I can. But this is the fundamental difference in our culture, the materialist model and the Buddhist approach. You can have all that wisdom, but you can go home and beat up your husband, can't you? Beat up your children, be neurotic and depressed. Because the wisdom we talk about has nothing to do with ethics and nothing to do with happiness. The Buddhist approach is a system of ethics. It's a system of getting happy and stopping suffering, and it's a system of stopping ignorance and getting wisdom. But they happen to be in the Buddhist analysis, the Buddhist view. These are all integrated. They all come to the same thing. This is a major difference. So for Buddhism, it would not be possible to have proper wisdom, authentic wisdom, without ethics, and that would bring you and it would bring you happiness. These are all come together. There's a really important thing. You don't have to believe anything I'm saying. I'm simply telling you the Buddhist approach. Like if I were Einstein, you listen to it and you can go check it out if you like, It's a really powerful point. It's fundamentally necessary. So, all of this goes on in the mind. We are all mind possessors. It's a lovely term in Tibetan, sem chen, that we translate as sentient being. Mind possessor, I think, is a more delicious phrase, more direct. So tasty, mind possessor. And for the Buddha, there are trillions and trillions of mind possessors. Humans are a tiny percentage. All the creatures, all the bugs, all the ants, all the dust mites, all the animals, all the lions, all the buffaloes, all the billions of tiny fishes in the sea. Trillions. And then there's countless numbers that we can't even see. The Buddha would assert that exist. Mind possessors with subtler levels of physicality that's not visible to our senses, but eventually are cognizable when we've accessed a subtler level of our mind, using these amazing techniques these Indians before the Buddha came up with, created this brilliant psychological skill that mindfulness that has come from, that's known as single-pointed concentration, shamatha, calm abiding, this brilliant technique, thousands of years old, this brilliant psychological skill that enables us to access these subtler levels of our mind that Buddha is asserting as existing. So why would you want to get rid of anger, jealousy, fears, depression, anxiety, up and down like yo-yo? Why would we want to? In a way, it's evident, but if we're so believing in the view that these are a normal part of a normal person, we'll be reluctant to even think the possibility of getting rid of them because it just sounds so weird. I remember recently a woman, and this is the first response we have when we first hear this, she was shocked. She almost laughed. She was shocked, and I understand. She said, that's ridiculous. What kind of person would you be without any anger, without jealousy, without depression? We kind of think of some absurd person running around looking like Pollyanna all day, being obsessively happy and ridiculous, as if they're not a whole person at all. We can't conceive of a person, a whole person, a person who's rid of rubbish, because we so in our models so assume it's a normal part. We've completely kind of give equal status. So it's a shock to even hear this, to even consider the possibility of it, you know. We resist it mightily. It just sounds like a mad person. We don't get it, you know. So it's quite shocking what Buddha's saying. So from the Buddhist point of view, the reason we should want to be compelled to want to lessen, even forget getting rid of, that's long term, but begin the work of lessening fears, anger, jealousy, depression, anxiety. That's what His Holiness said yesterday. It's so simple. This is a job. Why? Guess what, honey? Guess what, honey baby? Guess what, petal? Buddha's saying. Guess what, sweethearts? Because this is what makes you miserable. It's almost so simple, it's embarrassing. Now, at one level, we know it utterly. Every one of us knows the word depression, anxiety, even mild levels of it. We know it is horrible. But so then, if we know it's horrible, why is it so hard for us to get rid of it? Because we don't think we should get rid of depression. We think we have to locate out there the thing, the person, the event, the object that causes my depression. So we spend all our lives searching like for a needle in a haystack. That's when we go to our therapist. We go back into the past, don't we? We look into the body, the genes, the chemicals, the DNA, the brain. Then we look into the past, the events, mummy, daddy, mummy, the Catholic nuns, what happened. We even go back into looking into the brain. Then we can go look into grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, back to the monkeys. This is where we do our analysis. We're looking for the causes of our suffering. It's perfect to look for the causes of our suffering. How incredible. Buddha says we're not looking in the right place. That's all he's saying. He's suggesting that. He's not saying that when your boyfriend is kind to you, that it's not a source of your happiness. Of course, it's a cause of your happiness. And it's not saying when your boyfriend's mean to you that it's not one of the causes of your suffering. Of course it is. But we think it is everything. We put all our eggs in the one basket. We think that exactly is where all the causes are. And why would we? Because that's our philosophical view of materialism. That's our scientific view. It's only now, really with respect, that with His Holiness coming along and having these amazing meetings with the greatest brains in our culture, people begin to shape their assumptions now about what exactly consciousness is. And you know, looking into this Buddha's view, paying attention. It's very powerful, very marvelous. I remember when I was working on Lama Zopa's book about how to help at the time of death, which has just come out as a paperback now. And this is an advertisement, and I highly recommend it. It's called How to... what's it called now? They changed the label, changed the name. What's it called? How to Face Death Without Fear. It's just come out as a paperback. It's been out for a while, the PDF from the FPMT, and it's been out of a sort of a hardback from Wisdom called How to Enjoy Death, but it's now called How to Face Death Without Fear. And it's like a handbook. It's a manual from Lama Zopa on what to do, how, when, to help your loved ones during the times before, at the time of death, after death. It's an incredible book, so fantastic. So I remember when I was editing it, I remember reading a book by an American medical journalist called Dick Teresi. And the book is called The Undead. And it's not about zombies. He's a very funny man. He's a wonderful fellow. And his expertise is, you know, the medical profession. He's a journalist in the States. So the book was really about, and was quite scathing actually, about all the consequences and the difficulties now and the conflicts in views about in the materialist world, in America and particularly in the States, about exactly when does death occur, what is death, what is life. And so it's excellent that people are coming up against their assumptions, because of course the view is you're only the brain, and when you stop breathing, which in the Buddhist view is the fourth of the 8 stages of death. When you stop breathing, that's when you're dead. So if you want your heart or your liver or whatever they're going to cut out of you, you're going to keep the person breathing. Well, as Lama Zopa says in this book very clearly, and you know, the book is advice about what to do in the different scenarios, and one of them is what to do if your loved one gives their organs. There are many real serious problems from the Buddhist perspective, because when you stop breathing from the Buddhist perspective, because remember the mind isn't physical, you're not dead yet. You're not ready for the body bag. you've got your subtle consciousness there now, and you could be 3 more days before that leaves the body. And there are ways of proving this. I mean, ways of testing whether the mind has left the body. So when the subtle consciousness is there, and so then that means the person's still alive. So what they do is they keep the person breathing, the heart is still beating, the brain is moving or whatever it does, and the body's all toasty and warm. But as far as our view is concerned, they're dead. So I remember he had a whole chapter on different people's experiences called out-of-body experiences. You don't actually leave your body. The experience of it, it's your subtle mind. When you're unconscious, or when you're asleep, it's a very common experience. People, have this experience of being out of their body, and that's your subtle consciousness. In Buddhism, in the Vajrayana, you've got gross consciousness, subtle consciousness, very subtle consciousness, the spectrum of cognition. We only assert the gross level in our culture. So lots of people report, so many people report experiences of like astral travel, for example, that we talk about, people going in different places with their mind. Or when he had a whole chapter on people observing their own operations. So of course our culture just does not believe this. But he joked about it because there was in one of these examples, there was one woman who had this, she was like, had to have this such a radical procedure. They had to practically make her dead from the materialist point of view in order to do the operation. And so from their point of view, there was no way she could have cognition of any kind. But she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience. So the doctors can't ignore this now. There's so much more of this, and it's coming up more and more. And he reported on this, So one doctor was quoted as saying, who's in this field, organs. I forgot, I didn't say that at the beginning, I'm sorry. It's that when you're taking organs out of people. I forget the proper word for it. That's the whole book's about that. And he was quite cynical about it, in many ways, the arrogance and the hubris of the industry, perhaps, and the manipulating of people and families, etc. Whatever. So the thing was, this doctor said in this business, sorry, one more, he quoted all the time, and this is common in our cultures for centuries. There are reports from all cultures about people who supposedly, quote unquote, come back to life. Even in the Victorian times, apparently in the UK, people were buried with a little bell in case you woke up and you can ring the bell and hopefully they'd save you. This is not uncommon, and he quoted this a lot in the book, and this is one of the events that occurs a lot that is really confusing the materialist scientific world, because if you're dead, how can you come back to life? So it's really, but I think it's excellent that people are now forcing us to question our assumptions. So this doctor said, I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but this I can say. So I think it's brilliant that people are looking at this now. And that's, of course, why His Holiness is playing such a major role in this. This last 30, 40 years, there's one organization called Mind and Life. You'll see their website, mindandlife.org. So many conferences over the last 30, 40 years with all the best brains in our culture, and people more and more now taking His Holiness so seriously. Therefore, this past Indian amazing great thinkers and scholars and yogis for the last 3,000 years. Seriously, lessening a little bit our hubris, our arrogance, that we know everything and everybody else knows nothing. So it's marvelous this is happening. So, okay, the Buddha's view is your consciousness, your mind, isn't physical. So this is way too interesting. He doesn't use the word soul or spirit. So the default assumption we all have, if you talk spiritual, we're talking a third component. We have body, mind, which we mean by the brain, and then a spirit. Buddha doesn't use that word. He uses the word mind or consciousness, but he uses that to refer to not your brain. As he says, that's non-physical. So that includes your intellect, your clever mind, your clever thoughts, your emotions, especially that. Unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being, this is covered by the word mind or consciousness in Buddhism. Got to get, to hear the teaching, I'm going to say the word 1,000 times here, mind, so get used to what it means in Buddhism. We're not discussing the brain. That's another discussion. We're discussing the actual subjective cognitive process itself. And that's what we have to become intimately familiar with. Why? Because the neuroses in there, which Buddha has found are not at the core of our being, can be rid of, because they're the cause of our suffering. And the virtues, the positive, beneficial, useful, valid states of mind, we're going to discuss these. These are the source of our happiness. So the job of being a Buddhist. The job of being a Buddhist is a cognitive one. Centrally, initially, crucially, the heart of it is learning to become intimately familiar with the workings of your own mind. Why? So that you can learn to be in control of it. Why? Because guess what, honey? You're sick to death of suffering. And this stuff, the rubbish in here is what's breaking our hearts. But like I said before, okay, so the words are simple. The words aren't complicated. These words are not complicated. This is not, you don't have to squeeze your brain to hear these words. They're very delicious, very exciting. To even hear that someone has presented their own findings about how you can rid the mind of this stuff. I mean, if it were a science, we'd pay them $10 billion to do that. We'd pay $10 billion to do a course on it. Well, Buddha's been telling us very quietly for 2,500 years, but we think it's religion. Oh, yeah, you just believe it, No, believing's useless. What does belief do? Belief is useless. Belief is intellectual laziness. Merely believing. I'm being rude if you're a Christian. I'm not being rude. The difference between believing in botany and becoming a botanist is so evident you can't even talk about it. It's so obvious. You can believe in botany for 10,000 years, but it won't help you get a garden, will it? But learning botany, wow, now you can make a garden. That's the point. That's the point, So, these words are very exciting and delicious. You mean I can become less neurotic, less angry, less depressed, less jealous, and therefore less suffering? Yes, Buddha says, and here's my methods. We should be so blissed out. I can't believe we should be just completely blissed out to think that someone's even suggesting this. And he says, don't believe me. Go check it yourself. Put your money where your mouth is, So if it's so easy, the words are easy. And actually, this is the point. Technically, it's really easy to do it. You simply change your mind. But why is it so difficult? Not because it's not technically difficult. It's technically easy to have different thoughts, to change your mind from negative to positive. But why is it so difficult for us? Because we are addicted, totally programmed in the negative stuff. And he says, not just since we're born, but since beginningless time. Countless rebirths. So they're deeply ingrained in us, deeply habitual, so deeply so that, to the point where in our culture, we don't even think that what goes on in our mind, as Lama Zopa puts it, plays any role at all in our lives. This is how disconnected we are, the Buddha would put it, from our own selves. We so buy into the external world is the point when it comes to happiness and suffering. The causes of my happiness are out there and I'm going to get them. The causes of suffering are out there and I'm going to avoid them. This is how every sentient being spends their lives. The ants, the dogs, the monkeys, and the humans. And this is what Buddha means by being in samsara. And we are trained in this to perfection. But Buddha says we're up a garden path. Oh no, you can't be up a garden path without a paddle, can you? You're up a creek without a paddle. Sorry. You're up a garden path. You've lost the plot, So his expertise, his methods, his expertise, the job to be done is work on your mind. That's it. Unwrap. So I have to unravel all this stuff in there. This is the job, First, why? Because this is how you will suffer less and how you will get happy. Then, and that's the wisdom wing. A bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. Then, when you know how, you can help others. That's it. You can't leap into helping others. We can spend the whole day just on that topic. It's one of the commonest mistakes we Buddhists make in our culture. Especially if we're kind of, not homeless and not in totally abusive relationships and not with 14 children and no money and not living on the streets and not with no job. Most of us are fortunate, perhaps most of us are fortunate, we've got at least a mattress to sleep on and one or two friends we can count and some money in the bank and some sanity. So then we think, oh, I'm not suffering. And why we think that is because we have a very limited view of suffering. So this is where we need to listen if we'd like to understand Buddha's view. It's much more nuanced and much more pervasive and much deeper. His analysis of suffering. So, and we'll go into this. This is the Four Noble Truths, the four truths for the noble ones. It's one of the fundamental jobs we need to do. So the first stages of practice, is the point I'm making here, the wisdom wing, is about oneself. We have to want to be sick of suffering. We have to want to find the methods because we are sick of suffering. And I think we know this, but we feel guilty. Oh, I'm not suffering. I want to help others. So then we wonder why when we do help others that we collapse, we get overworked, we get exhausted, we get used used and abused. We wonder why, because of the commonest, or burnout. People who work among other humans get burnout commonly. And we wonder why. And we think, oh, that's because we've got too much compassion. We've got a complete misunderstanding from the Buddhist perspective, you know. So to do the compassion wing properly, you've got to do the work on yourself first. That's why, you know, I like the analogy of junior school, high school, university, postgraduate. This is a way of progressively and incrementally presenting all of Buddha's methods. So the two wings of the bird is a perfect way of covering all of it. And the compassion wing is the point. Helping others is the point. That's what a Buddha is. That's what the Bodhisattva path is. But you can't leap in, that's university though. You can't leap into university. We know that. You've got to do junior school and high school. This is the stuff, this is the nuts and bolts of Buddhist teachings about karma, the law of cause and effect, and Buddhist psychology. That's the nuts and bolts of what you've got to delve deep into. And the basis for this is because you are fed up with suffering and you want to learn the nuts and bolts of you choosing to use Buddha's views. No one's forcing you to look at his analysis of what is suffering and what its causes. And once you've established what suffering is, then you've established the causes, the method is implied, the solution is implied. So this is what Buddha's, let's look at this one. It's a really good, it's a crucial analysis to do. This is the first teaching Buddha gave at Deer Park, just near Varanasi. Banaras is an amazing Indian city. I think they say that it's the most, it's been like for 5,000 years, I think, unbrokenly, can't think of the word, been occupied as a city. It's on the Ganges, the river Ganges, you know, just a little bit out of town. There's a town called Sarnath. And there's this place there called Deer Park. It used to be a place given by a king or something at the time of the Buddha. And after he got enlightened, about, you know, a few days walk, we go there every year on our pilgrimage. There's another commercial break. I keep bringing in commercials. We do this pilgrimage to raise the money for the prison project since 2001. And we start in Kathmandu, then we go to the holy places there, and then we go to India. We meet our bus and we spend 10 days in India, and there's amazing, wonderful buses. And we have our own bus driver. They're just wonderful human beings, I can't tell you, traveling all through India to the holy places where the Buddha went. It's one of the most special experiences. I've done 16 or 17, and I'm not bored yet, I promise. We're supposed to be doing another one in February. Let's hope everything's okay. But we go to these places where the Buddha went, where he got born, where he passed away, where he got enlightened, and where he taught, you know. It's just the most special experience. People have special dreams, special meditations. People just love this experience. They really, people, some of you have done it, you know. Some people just love it. So special. So we go to, so he got enlightened in Bodh Gaya, in this Bihar, this state called Bihar. It's about the poorest state in India. And I think it's several days walk from there. I think on the map it's west. Is Varanasi, and then this little town called Sarnath, where this place called Deer Park is. So after Buddha got enlightened in Bodh Gaya on the river there, the Naranjana River, and he didn't know what to do, he thought he better go start walking and start teaching. So he went to Varanasi, and he met some of his old disciples there from years before. And then he gave his first teaching, and it's called the Four Noble Truths. Well, I mean, I think the truths aren't noble. I think it's the four truths for the noble ones. Noble one, I forget the term in Sanskrit, for a person who's accomplished this knowledge, who's realized this, you know. And I think facts is a nicer word. So the four facts for the noble ones, the four facts. So these facts of life are, what's happened? Everything's okay? I heard a noise. These four facts are about suffering. That's the way Buddha framed his experiences, you know, and this is his first teaching. So as I said before, one way of describing the entire Buddha's path from A to Z is in terms of how to stop suffering and how to get happiness. And these words seem fairly kind of random and casual. But when we'll go into this in more detail, when we look at the mind, when we unravel our emotions, these words, happiness and suffering, have a profound view in all the neurotic states of mind and in the development of the virtuous states of mind. Love and compassion, for example, the essence of all the good qualities. Love is the delight in someone else's happiness. And then the wish, may you be happy. And then even more radically, great love, they call it. What can I do to make you happy? And what's compassion? Compassion is empathy with someone's suffering. Oh my God, look at that suffering. And then there's great compassion. What can I do to take it away? So suffering and happiness is huge when it comes to the virtues. Now, if we look at the delusions, we're going to go into this in a second. Attachment, this junkie in us, is the desperate junkie to get the thing that we are convinced will bring us happiness, and to avoid the thing that we're convinced will cause us suffering. So suffering and happiness aren't just random ideas. They're primordial. They pervade the universe, and all any sentient being wants is happiness, and all any sentient being wants is to not suffer. So this whole way of approaching Buddhism as a methodology for getting rid of suffering and getting happiness sounds pretty powerful. Thank you very much. So the 4 truths, the 4 facts for the noble ones. Well, the first is there is suffering. Guess what, folks? And he articulates, and there's 3 levels. The first is the suffering of suffering, or the suffering of pain. And it's really simple. This is when the bad things happen. We get that. And that's the one agreement on this planet between everybody. And that's the monkeys and the dogs as well. When they get the bad things, we know it's suffering and we don't want it. Look at our lives, you know. First, the suffering of pain, suffering of suffering. Second is more nuanced and is not our understanding of things. The second one, he calls it, the Buddha calls it, the suffering of change. And what he's referring to is what we call happiness. We'll leave it there for the second. We'll go into this. So it's kind of shocking, quite shocking initially. What we think of as happiness, Buddha actually calls it a subtler, more nuanced, more pervasive, deeper level of suffering. I mean, that initially is quite depressing. So we need to understand it carefully, not misunderstand it, if we want to understand Buddha. Then, third, even more subtle, that we do not even posit as a possibility. It's very abstract for us. We won't even begin to go here. It's only when we really talk about emptiness we go into this one. This is called all-pervasive suffering, or conditioned suffering. Forget even that one for the moment. So forget even the second kind for the moment. Forget even the second kind. Let's look at the first one, because this is the one that the world understands. Everybody knows about bad things happening. Look at us right now, you know. Everybody knows about, and everybody knows we don't want them. So this is the view that the universe, including the dogs and the monkeys, share. When the bad things happen, that's called suffering. The difference is we think that that is the only suffering. Buddha's view is more sophisticated, as you wish, up to whether you think it's right or not. More nuanced, more subtle, more pervasive. So there is suffering. First kind, 3 kinds: suffering of suffering, suffering of change, suffering of all pervasive. 3, and the first noble truth. And of course, all the teachings on it are extensive. We're just keeping it very simple here. What time do we start? We've got not quite an hour yet. Oh, we're fine. We're good. Okay, we'll have some questions for you. So then the next one is, guess what, folks? There are causes, and he articulates them. This is pretty shocking. We're still looking in the West. We're still looking, aren't we? We're not being rude. I always sound so blunt and arrogant when I talk. But not being rude. We materialists are still finding the cause of suffering. We don't know yet. We know some. But 99% of the suffering, we can't work out what the causes are yet. That's just how we are. It's okay. We're trying hard. Buddha's got his view. And he might be wrong, by the way. But he's allowed to say it. He's not shoving it down your throat. He's not saying you must believe him. He's saying, here's my methodology. Go check it out yourself. He's allowed to say what he thinks is right, but he gives his methodology, and he says he's relaxed. He said, "I found the method. This is what I've done myself. Here's my method. Over to you." That's right. Nothing to do with just belief. You've got to start by listening, if you want. So the next one is the causes. The third one is, guess what, folks? You can get rid of it. Causes and its suffering, suffering and its causes. And fourth is how to do it. Pretty straightforward. It's like a little map, a little road map, like a recipe book, you know. So that sounds encouraging. So let's look at the first kind of suffering first, the one that's not complicated, not complicated. So there's 2 things here. One is, if we look into this world as we know it, our human planet that we know, and we can discuss all these in just within that framework. But we all know, if we've studied Buddhism a little bit more in depth, and if we'd like to study it more in depth, there's a bigger picture as well. Buddha talks about the entirety of all of samsara, and he would assert that, you know, there are different realms of different levels of existence, different levels of kinds of sentient beings with their own particular experiences. not just human and animal ones we can see on this planet. There's other levels of existence, other types of beings. So there's a much broader framework for understanding these kinds of suffering. But we're not even going to go there now. We're going to just discuss in this life because we can get that. Okay? It's just kind of encouragement. The bigger picture point of view, we'll go into it when we can start looking into the causes. We'll go into this. Okay, so just look at the simple level, this one within our life, and we know since we're born up until now, we have experiences. We experience things in relation to other beings, especially that. We're very social beings, aren't we? We experience things at the hands of others, isn't it? That are called suffering. Boyfriends who cheat on you, husbands who beat you, wives who lie, partners who hurt you, sisters who go against you, mothers who reject you, people who kill you, people who rape you, look at our experiences. Since the time we're conceived up to now, you think about this, we can divide our experiences in relation to sentient beings. And as I said, we're very social beings, simply in two. We can talk about those experiences that are really happy, people who are kind to you, loving, generous, forgiving, sweet. We know those, and we know the opposites. So that's called happiness. As far as we're concerned, the nice ones are called happiness, and the other ones are called suffering. Speaking really simply, it's uncomplicated. We can also look, so we can see this, so bad things happen and good things happen. We can see that. We want the good things and we don't want the bad things. But we can see, no matter how hard we try, we don't seem to be able to organize it, We don't seem to be able to control it. Things come out of the blue, like winning the lottery or getting stolen from. Either way, they come out of the blue. There's no warning, You're heading towards winning the lottery. It's coming soon. Be ready. No, it just comes, boom. Or hubby leaves you overnight. There's no warning, 5 years before when he started disliking you. He doesn't tell you. You're stupid. You can't see. So suddenly it seems overnight he's suddenly gone. But if you had any common sense, you would have seen it. Well, there's no preparing. So we see like this. We see it's this way. And it's like from pillar to post. No wonder we're neurotic, You can never be sure. We get this. So now, we know if you ask, do you like someone being kind to you, loving, generous, optimistic? Yes, thank you, yes, yes. Do you like someone lying, stealing, killing, cheating? No, no, no. We get it. We understand it. It's not rocket science. So now Buddha's telling us here, folks, I've found that this is this kind of suffering. We can all agree. Then the next one, the second cause, the second of this four is that there are causes. So surely we know ourselves. If you first establish you have a problem, you have to first establish you've got a problem. You have to locate the problem accurately and label it accurately, don't you? Then the next step has to be, you now surely want to find the causes, don't you? Because why? Because you know that if you now know the causes of that problem, you can stop doing it. So you'll stop getting the problem. It's hardly rocket science. It's completely logical. It's completely reasonable behavior. So Buddha's telling us here, there are causes of why your husband beats you, why you get cheated by the next door neighbor, why the bank says no to you when you want a loan, why what we often call this is unfair, these bad things happening. And we can see in this life we've done nothing to deserve it. We've been a nice person. This is why the agony, I think, is very fascinating, this point. Even if we did punch our husband in the nose and he punched us right back, we still, even though there was a cause, our punch, we still feel it's not fair, don't we? We still don't like it. So especially when bad things happen to us that we can't see that we had any cause of it, we can't see that we did anything, then that's the pain of that kind of experience for us is enough to make us go crazy. And this is the main pain in our culture, in our world. Because we don't see there is any cause at all, meaning we can't see anything that I did that we deserve. So that's a major way we talk about our suffering, isn't it? Why did that happen to me? And then we say, I don't deserve it. This is a really painful, real experience, isn't it? We have that deep in our bones, deeply. Now, by the way, also, we know, but we forget these sometimes, lots of good things have happened to us. And it's very fascinating. We're going to go into this when we do the unraveling of our emotions. We're going to see that when the good thing happens, we don't agonize. We don't go, why do good things happen to me? What did I do to deserve it? I can't believe this good thing happened to me. Why do good things happen? I've never yet had a person ask that question. And we're going to go into the reasons in a minute. We grab it and just assume we do deserve it. This is really, I tell you, the rest of the day we can just discuss this one concept. This idea that we don't deserve the bad and we do deserve the good. It's really fascinating to unpack that. We will. It's very fascinating. And this is the source. This sense of it's like it does make us lose our mind sometimes. The pain of it's so bad when bad things happen and we can't see why. It's very fascinating. And the fact is, we want to know why. Everybody says, I don't know why it's happening. We look into the world now. Why is all this happening? Why do some people die and some not? Why do some people get COVID-19 and not? Why does the rich people do this? Why this? We're endlessly asking the question why. As if we never asked it, we shouldn't worry about it. We should just accept it. But we do. We ask why. That's what drives all of science. Why? It's a human thing. Why? It's powerful. It's an important question. And Buddha's happening. Now, Jesus has his answers. Lenin has his answers. Marx has his answers. The Australian Aboriginals have their answer. They've been quietly sitting there for 40,000 years, developing their own amazing system of understanding the universe called the dream time. It's so subtle and so unusual. I can't understand it until the white people came along and, messed them up. We've all got out, the humans all over the planet for centuries have been coming up with explanations of the universe. Is it not true? I mean, how marvelous. As the Tibetans would say, we've at least been, some people over the centuries have been doing more than eat, sleep and go to the toilet. How fantastic. Trying to work out the meaning of life. How amazing. So scientists these days are doing it. Philosophers have been the centuries since the beginning of this time. Australians, the Aboriginals, the Indians in America, you name it. You go to any country, every country I go to, you scrape the surface and you find another group of people who were there before and their views. It's just the way we are as humans. And Buddhism happens to be one of the presentations of what and why and how. That's all. That's it. And we're looking at that one here. Why? We ask why. It's very fascinating. So Buddha's got his answers. So there is suffering. This one, we all get it. We understand it. And we know we don't want it. No one has to teach you that. So now let's go to the second one. This is the point now, getting closer to home. What are the causes, baby? Well, Buddha's got his presentation, deeply extensive, very clear. And it's 11 o'clock. Okay, before we continue, said an awful lot already, and we're only beginning to get to the unraveling our minds. We're getting there, giving background. But I think just to clarify points, not to ask, I'm about to talk about things now and causes, etc., but just clarifying points about what I've said so far. Any other questions? Is there anything in the chat box there, Andrew?
Yeah, let's start with Kathy. Once you're done, make sure you unmute yourself, ask your question. Once the conversation is over, make sure you remute yourself. But Kathy, yeah. I think you have a question.
Okay. Are you there, Kathy?
Hi, yeah.
I'm trying to see you. Wait, I've got to see you first. Where are you? Let me look for you.
Okay.
I can't see you.
You find me?
Usually a green box comes up, doesn't it?
Yeah, usually when I talk, I thought.
Well, there you go. I've got you, darling. Go for it.
Right. I have a red background. You were talking about the idea that you need wisdom first and then compassion and helping people.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
But it made me think that doesn't helping others also bring us out of our suffering, and it can be done at the same time?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, okay. If you see someone who's sick, right? You can have incredible compassion, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
But what if you don't know how to fix them? Then you're stuck, aren't you?
So you need the wisdom.
You need the method. So you don't wait till you've perfected acupuncture after 27 years before you lift a finger to help people. You've learned one day of acupuncture to that degree you can't help. You can't help more. So compassion's not enough. It's got to be informed by how to help. That's the point.
And the wisdom doesn't have to be perfected, because then you'd be waiting forever.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Exactly.
Okay.
In that sense, yes. So if you're thinking, the wisdom is a specific approach of learning to know about your mind and suffering and its causes for you, and then once you've learned that, now that informs your capacity to help them. So you can learn a little bit and then do that much help, and you keep growing it. It's incremental and it's very interconnected. Of course it is, darling.
Okay.
It's a good point, Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and if anyone else has questions, go ahead and send it to me privately. We do have another one from Greg. Greg, go ahead.
Okay, Greg, go, baby.
Thank you, Venerable Robina, for teaching us. I was I had a question. The way that you relate Buddhist spiritual practice to scientific inquiry, I find so accurate.
Uh-huh.
In science, we hypothesize, we conduct our experiments, we publish
Okay.
our findings, and then we send out our methods so that, other people can validate the experiments.
That's
Uh,
right.
and so, like, the Buddha, he conducted his experiments and found the path to enlightenment, and then he shared the method with others and with us.
And then it's
Um,
up to us to prove it to be true by doing it, isn't it?
Right, exactly. But where this analogy seems to break down, and you can
Uh-huh.
correct me where I'm wrong here,
Yeah.
is that the Sangha are prohibited from verifying the realizations they have achieved from following his methods.
Who told you
Um,
that? Say, stop. Wait a minute. Unpack that. Say it again in different words.
sure. Well, it seems like from what I've read, that if someone in the Sangha has like realized emptiness, they're not permitted to share that with the lay community. Is that accurate?
It's not as rigid as that, okay?
Oh,
What's
okay.
behind that, sweetheart? What's behind that is humility. Our thing is we're so arrogant, and as soon as, I mean, even in our culture, if we don't even know anything, we're going to say we know it. We're the first to had I know the answer. So it's a profound practice in keeping your realizations internal and humble. And when the time is right, on the basis of that wisdom, you can then help others. And then, of course, you can be revealed eventually to a person who's ready for it. Of course. I mean, that's demented to think that you're not permitted. I mean, you can't, and this is an interesting point. It's very interesting because one time this backfires for the Tibetans. They're famous for their humility. And even in the monasteries, it's very powerful. In the monasteries, the great monastic university system, where they study for 20, whatever years. You would never, you only teach what you know when you're asked. So there you are in this whole monastic environment. It's very marvelous. And all the little new monks, or in these days, little new nuns come into the monastery and they go to the debates that evening and they check this dude over here and they check that dude over there. They say, oh, I like him. Then they'll go to his room and prostrate 3 times. Will you please teach me? But if you don't get asked to teach, you could be the greatest scholar sitting in that place, but you won't open your mouth because you don't just blurt out on top of other people. If you are asked to teach, you will teach. It's very profound, So this humility is extraordinary, but it backfires. There's this lovely story about His Holiness in Wisconsin years ago. And talking as usual, they'd always say, I don't know anything. That's how they always say. And Tibetans understand that. But it upsets us. And this fellow was in tears. And he said, well, if you don't know anything, Your Holiness, what chance do we have? And it's really a profound point. And I notice now over the years, His Holiness, when he teaches to Westerners, he is describing his own experience because that's how we talk. It's not being arrogant. When he says, when I was 15, I learned this and I felt this, he teaches quite differently because we need to be given confidence that it's possible. We don't get this, I don't know anything. It's weird for us, So it's a very major point. It's got real logic behind it.
Thank
Do you
you,
understand? Okay, good. And that's why all is in the teachings as well. All the great holy beings, His Holiness will occasionally say, I this and I that, but normally they say the yogis this and the yogis that. They would never say I. Lama Zopa would never say I. He always says, I'm just an old Mickey Mouse person. But whenever the great yogis are talking, it's from their experience. You just know it. But you've got to have that kind of subtlety and be aware and be humble ourselves and understand the way they talk, But we're all used to, I know everything, I'm the one, and we're frantic to let everybody know because that's our arrogance. We're so foolish. And then we look at our world. Whom can we trust? Everybody's vomiting out, they know everything. And it's just like this random, demented world of crazy opinions, of idiots all raving on about what they know. It's really painful and hard to judge anybody because we can't trust any words now. Do you understand? Because it's got logic and powerful to it. It's huge,
Yeah, I'm understanding a little better. I think that's one of the most beautiful things is that there's nothing that there's no phenomena that we can't cognize with our minds. It's a matter of developing it to that subtle level. So we can prove everything that Buddha said eventually.
Eventually, like everything's eventual, isn't it? It's one step at a time. So is Einstein, and as His Holiness says to us in the West, if you actually do practice Buddhism as you go, this is my words a bit, ticking the boxes as you go, and you get to a point where in your own development, according to the instructions, and you check the Buddha's wrong, well, of course you must reject him. That level of rigor and clarity is what we must have. Any body of knowledge will be the same. Any cookbook that you do, and if you discover that recipe is wrong because you know it from your experience, then that person is wrong. And so it's provable that we never think of spiritual like this, ever.
And what really helps to give me confidence is this is exactly what the Buddha did. He, like you say in your other teachings, he took the traditions as far as he could go, and then when he found them were wrong, he diverged. We have to have the courage to do the same.
If we discover from our own experience, if we discover Buddha's, let's remind us what a Buddha is. When you've achieved Buddhahood, when you've achieved perfection, when you've rid the mind of all your delusions, your consciousness, which is not physical, would pervade the universe. There will be nowhere your mind isn't. There's no phenomenon you don't cognize. There's no mind you can't see perfectly. There's no one's karma you can't see perfectly. There's no one with whom you are not oneness with. And there's no limit to your power to manifest your mind in a billion forms, in billions of universes, for billions of years, for the sake of billions of sentient beings. So if you got that far and you prove there's more to go, then go for it, baby. Way to go. And hold your breath. Okay. Someone else.
Lorna, do you want to jump in with your question?
Go, Lorna.
Hi, Robina. Thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Hello, sweetheart.
I just wanted to comment that I watched the Dalai Lama being interviewed by, I can't remember his name on TV now, but he was asked what kind of legacy do you want to leave? And the Dalai Lama's response was, we Buddhists don't think in that way. All we can do is the best with our lifetime, do the best with this lifetime. But we don't think about legacy or
leaving your mark, in other words.
Of that. Exactly. And I was really very struck by that. And the humility of that was so beautiful.
It's true, isn't it? Exactly. That's wonderful, Lorna. Thank you for that. That's very nice to hear. Thank you. Anyone else?
And, Wes, did you have a quick question on realizations?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Venerable Robina. I'm a sort of a first-time attendee and a long-time sort of listener, but one of the questions I had is, if we talk about realizations, what are the things that, like, you're not supposed to talk about? My wife and I have these discussions where sometimes we're thinking about things that we're both learning on our own individual path, and then is it appropriate to share or not to share? I mean, her and I, we share everything, but I'm just curious, what are the things that people say you're not supposed to talk about?
I understand. I understand. So we can't don't even use those words, not supposed to. There's no not supposed to. There can't be like, there are guidelines, there's instructions. But if we understand the meaning behind it, it's completely logical. So if you have got a friend, it happens to be, you say, your wife, and you're both you got similar understandings of things, is that right?
Yes.
And you're both moving in the same direction?
Same path, actually. She introduced me to you, so it's interesting.
Okay. And you trust each other?
Yes.
And you don't want to be arrogant?
Right.
You want to be compassionate?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're both coming from that place, and you both have this, it's like between a therapist and a client, or like a confessor, and in the old-fashioned days when you're a Christian, there's this incredible sense of safety and respect. And the only reason to talk is the point. The only reason to say words to each other is so you can help each other sort it out. If you already have that, and there's no, and she doesn't want to discuss it, when we go into the mind in more detail, which we're going to be doing, when we see the depth of our attachment to reputation, attachment to being seen as important, attachment to being loved, attachment to being approved of, it's very primordial in us, and it's what drives most of what we do now. So when we really are watching that aspect of ourselves like a hawk, we will keep very quiet. And the only reason to talk is within the framework of that person, where they're coming from, and what's appropriate for each other, not to just, and this is huge practice. This is the thing that's behind it. Not to be driven by delusion, not to be driven by attachment and crazy or arrogance or telling someone else what to do all the time. I mean, this is what this compels most of what we say doing things. So it's a profound practice to be silent, but not out of some arrogance, not out of some, oh, it's secret, I shouldn't say it, that's superstition. Understand?
Yes,
anything is permissible if it's of use to the other person, and it's useful for you to say it. If you don't need to say, this is also an important point. This is the wisdom wing and the compassion wing, okay? If you really think about our entire life, from the wisdom wing point of view, the only reason to open our mouth is if you need to get clear about what you think. And that implies the person there needs to be worthy of your words and a person you respect, right? You don't try and talk to the next door neighbor about your doubts. You have to have a person in front of you whom you can trust. Do you see my point? So the only reason to talk from the wisdom wing point of view, because the wisdom wing is all about you, is to help you get clear. And then the only reason to talk from the compassion wing point of view is for the sake of the other person. There's no other reason to talk on this planet. We would never open our mouths most of the time when we understand this. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Good. So important. What else was there?
Does anyone else, if anyone else wants to jump in with any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves. Otherwise, we can
keep on going. Okay, so let's keep going.
It looks like, yes, someone from, I don't have the name, just under MacBook. You can jump in with your question.
Okay. Well, who's there? Who is it? I can't see anything or hear anybody.
Yeah, whoever just messaged me, jump in.
Where is it? Who is it there? I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm unable to unmute myself.
Oh, Alessia. Okay, Alessia, I can hear you.
Sorry, I didn't put my name.
Okay, go on. I can hear you. Okay.
Thank you. So you mentioned earlier the translation of the Tibetan word for sentient beings, and you often say this, how accurate this word mind possessor is. And I find it difficult to understand, because then on other teachings, we are looking for this possessor of the mind, this possessor. And so I don't understand, when we use this expression mind possessor, who would be the possessor of the mind?
The person. So,
the person.
So Alessia is a mind possessor. She is a person. She fits the definition of the type of phenomenon called I, self, or person. So we're talking conventional reality here. So when we're looking into what exists and what doesn't, when we look at the wisdom, the more advanced levels of the wisdom wing, we first have to establish something as existing. So this is known as a thermos. We define it. It's a flat bottom metal container, and its function is to hold my tea. We've established that as an existent phenomenon, and we then proceed to look into how it exists. Same here. You're not a cup, you're not a toilet, you're not a lamp, you're labeled a person. The type of phenomenon that we are is as a sentient being, but even more broadly than that, even more fundamental, because sentient beings only include ordinary beings. A Buddha's not a sentient being, but the word that covers all of us, all beings, is a person or a self or an I. Those words are synonymous. So a Buddha is a person. You are a person. A dog is a person. A hell being is a person. An ant is a person. That's the label given to and that person is made up of some level of physical energy and a mind. So every person is a mind possessor. So it's a conventional truth. We're not talking ultimate truth here. We're talking conventional truth. Then we can look into how that possessor exists. But it's a conventional being who possesses a mind. You with me? Clear? We got to. You're leaving. No, but you're leaving. There's an assumption in your question that you're looking. You're saying, "Oh, this is a possessor. It's an inherent possessor." No, we're talking about conventional reality here. We're not even looking at emptiness. We're discussing in this.
Sorry, actually, no. For me, the thing that doesn't sound very logic in my mind is that we are saying that the person who is the mind and the body is the possessor of one part of itself, of the mind. So it's a bit strange, but I understand that it's.
Wait a minute. Okay.
Understanding the words.
No, I am a mind possessor. I possess a body and I possess a mind. That's right. That's correct. It's a statement. The person known as Alessia does possess a body and does possess a mind. That's not a contradiction. That's a conventional reality, not ultimate. It's true.
Then one could also say, I am a body, that we are body possessed.
Exactly. Equally that. Why not? Okay. Absolutely not a problem.
Okay.
I is a name of a phenomenon, and like this is a cup. It is a metal. It is a metal possessor. There's a cup that possesses metal, but this is the ultimate one. You won't separate the cup and the possessor. That's the point. That's ultimate. We're looking conventional. Still, it's the conventional discussion. Of course, you're a mind possessor and you're a body possessor. But the difference of the mind possessors is the universe is full of all these material phenomena, but some aren't mind possessors.
Okay, that's absolutely.
It's not a mind possessor. It's a physical, but it's elements possessor. It's a 4-element possessor. We are also 4-element possessor, but the difference between us and a cup is there's consciousness here and not there. Still, the conventional discussion is the point, not the ultimate.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back to our discussion. Okay, so now we're looking at the 4 truths for the noble ones. We're looking at the first kind of suffering, which is the suffering of suffering, which is the one we all know we hate, and even just in this life. Then we're going to looking at the causes now. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty. Now let's look at Buddha's analysis of the causes. This is the $64,000 question, or the $84 trillion question. Okay, so now, when it comes to, so the Buddha posits the law of cause and effect. He didn't make it up. It's how things exist. We get it. We're brilliant at science. We understand very well cause and effect. If what this is, we need to look at there's a thing called a flower, and then botanists have discovered the causes of it. A person, there's a tree, and we discover the causes of it. There's a table, we discover the causes of it. We're brilliant at this in our materialist world. In the materialist world, we are brilliant at it. The law of cause and effect. And we know once you establish a thing is called a flower, and then you establish the causes of it, you can keep getting it. We know if there's a thing called a sickness, we've established what it is, we establish the causes, and in some cases, we have found the solution to stopping it. This is the $84 trillion question. So, Buddha here is discussing suffering. And the first kind of suffering we're talking about is sentient being suffering when bad things happen to us. So now we know we don't like it, and so we think, I wonder what causes it, because I'd like to stop doing that so I don't get it in the future. That's the point. So then we now go to the second noble truth, and he tells us that there are actually thousands upon thousands of many causes and conditions that have to bring together anything that exists. I mean, there's just to get a flower, the number of things you have to bring together all correctly and accurately to produce the result. But he says, like we know, like with a flower, you can narrow it down to a few things. And the central one, the crucial one, without which you won't get a flower, the main one is the seed. So if you want a rose, you've got to get a rose seed, baby. Then but at the same time, you can hold a rose seed up in the air for 50 million years, you will never get a rose. Just because it's the main cause doesn't mean it doesn't need other secondary conditions. And this is the whole view of interdependence. And this is implying emptiness. Nothing exists in isolation. So we know you need some soil, some warmth, some moisture, and some time. And a bit of care, and guess what? You'll get your rose, baby. This is so simple, but it is profound. This is called cause and effect. Well, Buddha's expertise isn't botany, or mathematics or cakes. It's happiness and suffering. That's his expertise. That's his findings. So he narrows down that moment of suffering when Wes bunts me in the nose, so as far as I'm concerned, when I'm crying and you say, what's wrong, Robina? What's the cause of your suffering? And I'll say, Wes punched me in the nose. And that's fine for the world, because we all agree there's one cause of my suffering, and it's him. Look at the world. We all think now Mr. Trump, some people think Mr. Trump is the cause of all your suffering. It's clearly hysterically absurd. We love to find one cause, and then we dump everything on him or her or it. We do the same with happiness. Why are you happy, Robina? Oh, Wes is kind to me. So I dump all of the responsibility for my moment of happiness onto this fellow. This is really clearly absurd, so unnuanced. It's so gross. It's so unanalytical. So the Buddha's answer is this. Sorry, Robina. Wes does play a role. Definitely he's one of the secondary causes. There's no question about that. But he's merely a catalyst. He's like the soil. He's like the warmth. He's like the moisture. He is merely a catalyst. He ain't the main cause. This is a fundamental logical point for the Buddha. And this is not how we think. So what's the seed? What's the main cause? Well, guess what? There's two ways of putting it. And these main causes, shockingly enough, are both inside me. Yes, I am the main cause of my suffering. And yes, just to remind us, I am the main cause of my happiness. Just to remind us. Otherwise we get very depressed. So Buddha puts each individual being, every mind possessor, every ant, every hell being, every dog, every human, every god, every being in the center of responsibility for all their experiences. This is kind of a powerful concept. This is a pretty amazing concept. It's an unbelievable concept, actually. It's outrageous, and it's the central point in Buddhism. That each individual being, every mind possessor, every millisecond, one is experiencing the fruits of their past seeds. This is because there are two components of this causes. One is called karma, which is called action, we'll go into it, and one is called delusions, which is the mind. And they subsume to the one, delusions. My karma and my delusions. Karma means action. We're going to unpack it. Okay. So there are two main causes. A past action, number one, driven by a delusion, number two, and they subsume to the one. So they come down to the delusions in the mind are the main cause of that moment of suffering. And every millisecond of our lives, each second of our life, we're experiencing either a pleasant experience, happiness, or an unpleasant experience. There are a third category called neither or neutral. Let's forget those. Okay, they're boring. So essentially, we can look into our lives from the time we're conceived, and we can divide all of our experiences into happy and unhappy. And there's a spectrum, isn't there? So every millisecond, as many moments as you can count of breaking down those moments of happiness and moments of suffering. Every millisecond of every one of those experiences of happiness, every millisecond of every one of those experiences of suffering, each of them is the fruit of a past seed planted in my mind, which is not physical, which is a river of mental moments, which goes back to beginningless time, planted in my mind by a previous me. You know, me is just a label we give for this package now. That's it. That's the concept of karma. I mean, it's so fascinating. It's so simple. Again, conceptually not complicated. The only reason it's difficult for us is because it's completely, profoundly, and absurdly and utterly different from the views we carry in our mind at the moment that we take as a given. You know, it's okay. Buddha might be wrong. All we can do is look into what he says. We are the main cause of all our happiness and all our suffering. So, of course, if we hear it only as the suffering, and then you see we have to, if we unpack our normal response to that, which is guilt, you mean I'm the blame, we say, and this shows us the horror of this idea when Wes punches me in the nose and I really wasn't doing anything at that moment. I was being kind to him. Then suddenly the punch comes. Then, of course, this feeling of this outrage, how dare he do this to me? I don't deserve it. That itself is the main cause of so much of our pain. That horror, that shock. What did I do to deserve it? Nothing. You're right. I did nothing. Not now. But my mind comes from before. It's shown everything I think and do and say, sow seeds in my mind. Nothing goes astray. And when all the conditions, there's billions of seeds in my mind, like there's billions of rose seeds in the ground. And it's only when the sun and the moisture and the time and all the conditions come together that the rose pops up. Same here with that moment of suffering. If I'd never met Wes, that moment, that causes of 27 lives ago when I punched this particular person who's now called Wes, if I don't meet him, I don't get that wouldn't rise. We'd wait for the condition called Wes to pop up, you know. Something like that. Karma's pretty personal. This is not how we think in the world. So we need to unpack the concept of karma to understand this a little bit. You know, this is where we go, the commonest thing among Buddhists, they talk about karma. Oh yeah, I believe in karma. How does it work? Oh, I don't know. I believe in karma. That's like saying, why are there gardens? Why are there flowers in the garden? Oh, it's botany. I believe in botany. Oh, can you please tell me how you get a flower? Oh no, I can't do that. Well, how stupid you are. You've got to learn the nuts and bolts of it. Same here. Because the point about this is, it's not a question of believing, oh, I'm a bad person, I must have harmed Wes in the past, beat. That's kind of just infantile. No. Got to understand the logic. Understand that this natural law, if we're interested in it, no one's forcing us. So we can comprehend it. And the point of all that, the only point of learning botany is so you can apply it and get nice roses and pull out the weeds. Same here. The only reason is so I can apply the law so I can stop my future suffering because I'm in charge. That's the point. But Dalai Lama calls karma self-creation. It's a pretty interesting concept, you know. He doesn't posit a creator at all, and he's not being rude. He's got explanations of the mind, not physical, beginningless, endless, and the law of karma is what runs that mind. Or if you like, all the beings of the universe and all our lives run within this law of karma. Everything that grows in the universe, everything grows on the planet is growing within the natural law of botany. And this is interesting about what natural law means. No one made up botany. No, I mean, Einstein didn't make up relativity. It wasn't as if relativity wasn't existing until he invented it. That's schizophrenic. That's a conspiracy theory. That's the creator concept. There's no view like that in Buddhism. Relativity has always been how things are, but clever Mr. Einstein observed it. Natural law is what it means. Same with karma. It's always been there, but the Buddha has observed it. And he says, here's how to do it, and you can do the same. And what's the point of it? You use it. You use it to stop your own suffering and then to help others stop suffering. It's a practical application of it, you know. But we hear it in a tortured way. Fearful, bad, no good, guilty, shameful, blah, blah, blah. You know? So let's look into it in more detail. Some of them, just the practical points about it. But the big picture, always get the big pictures, is very helpful. So again, the big picture is this. Consciousness, not physical, is not the handiwork of a creator, is not the handiwork of mummy and daddy, did not begin in the mother's womb, therefore. So if you track yourself back in an unbroken chain of mental moments, which you can if you really learn to meditate, you will have perfect memory going all the way back. Then at the first second of conception, you have to ask the question, well, what happened there? The second before conception, egg was in mummy's body, sperm was in daddy's body. Where was your mind? It had nothing to do with them, baby, I promise you. They just provide you with a body. How kind. Your consciousness has its own continuity of mental moments, and you track that back, and not more than a few weeks, that consciousness, obviously at a subtle level, was in a previous body, and so on and so forth, so forth. All this is dealt with in great depth and detail in the teachings, you know. And it's the observation of the Buddha and anybody else who's done the job the Buddha has. So of course you take it as your hypothesis. It's going to be a while before we can prove this to be true. But when we've got single point of concentration, we can. When you've accessed your subtle level of mind in calm abiding meditation, then you can see this. You'll be able to see the past and future. Then you can prove it to be true. So let's look at karma, the law of karma, the natural law of karma. Okay. Sanskrit word means action, but the real meaning of it is intention, not like motivation. But intention, I will, volition, intention. This is the fundamental driver of everything in every sentient being. As Lama puts it, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought, I will. But because we come into this life programmed with countless habits that are virtually instinctive, we don't notice that they're intentional. We've so perfected them that it's beyond intention. But technically intention is there, you know. So it's very sophisticated, very subtle, the workings of all this stuff in the mind. Okay, so there are 4 ways. There's so many things about karma, but these are the fundamental things that I find so helpful to think about. There are 4 ways in which our present intentional actions, and that's every millisecond, will leave seeds in the mind, and then eventually when the conditions come together, will ripen. 4 ways. One is that, and this is now getting the bigger picture in Buddhism. Buddha would assert that there are many realms of existence. Realm meaning a bit like Star Trek, if you like, where you hop in, don't you? I've only watched a couple of them. You hop into a lift, an elevator, don't you? Then you pop up and you come to another one. Well, whatever. These are mental states, though. All these, I mean, humans are mental state, basically. It's a mental state. Animals and humans, we seem to, a lot of us share the same environment, don't we? But there are many beings, the Buddha says, whose environment we don't share, and who don't share our environment. There are different levels of cognition, different levels of karmically created experiences. It takes a while to hear this because we don't think about karma. So there's a whole spectrum of types of rebirth in this samsara. You know, Buddha says is in the lot that we're in, they call it the desire realm, the realm driven by this attachment, which we're going to get into. There are 6 different levels of types of rebirth, all on the spectrum from the most intense suffering to the most intense bliss. And again, this is happiness and suffering. And this is a major point in the Buddhist view and the major point in understanding karma, because it's this. So in general, Buddha's saying, every millisecond of what we think and do and say programs our mind. So seeds in the mind that eventually, unless we do something about those seeds, they're going to ripen. It's just the way things are, as certain in 4 different ways. The main way is a type of rebirth. Then within that rebirth, let's just think of us, we've got a human birth. We'll go into this. So now the other 3 ways that our karma ripen play out in this rebirth as a human. So the first result of our past karma is we get a human mummy, in our case, you know. So not more than a few weeks before our past death. All this is very just detailed, great detail to it. Various particular karmic seed, in our case, are very strong, intentional, virtuous karmic seeds of conscious, intentional, non-harming in general, but specifically non-killing. Practiced, as Lama Zopa says, in the framework of practicing in the past a spiritual path, in the framework of living in very strong vows of morality, vows of not killing, precepts. We'll discuss this. So like a miracle, if you like, I mean, it's not a miracle, it's logic, but, you know, so we have so many negative seeds in our bank vaults. There's nothing we ever do that ever goes astray. One of these was triggered before we stopped breathing in the past life. It's quite precise when it happens. And now, because in our case, it was a human one, which means already you're programmed, already a few weeks before your mother and father hop into bed. Maybe they haven't even met each other yet. Forget about you being a little spark in their eye. Forget that. A few weeks before that, in this past life, whatever life it would have been, we could have been a dog or an ant as well. The virtuous karmic seed we had practiced, could be a long time ago, could be most recent, was triggered. Already we're programmed at that time before we even die to go to that mother's womb when she hops to bed with that daddy. Very specific. Karma's very personal. The second lot of karmic seeds that are triggered at that time too are all the seeds. This is the first of the 3 ways that our present karma is now playing out in this life. And the next one is all what's called your tendencies or your intentions or your actions similar to the cause, or your intentions, the habits within our mind, whether you're Mother Teresa or Hitler or anywhere in between, all your tendencies, including love, kindness, compassion, killing, lying, raping, being good at music, being good at football, whatever your tendencies are. None of these come from your parents. This is shocking. It doesn't mean they don't play a role, but they don't come. This is a bizarre idea in Buddha's view, a very weird, impossible thing to happen, that some other person can actually give you anger, give you love. Not possible. They can trigger it, like Wes, you know. If I punch him in the nose, he's definitely one of the. When he punches me, we think he makes me angry. Like he is the cause of my anger, like as he put anger in me. No, the anger was already in my mind and his action triggered it. So the same with my mother. She was a musician. She taught me music when I was a kid. Normally we'd say my mother gave me, music genes. My mother was good at music because she practiced it in past lives, some kind of activity like that. And I must have been good at music because I must have practiced it. And we conveniently came together as mother and daughter. So she saw my potential and she trained me in music and singing. And so it triggered, she helped nourish my potential. So the fundamental point that Buddha's making is my tendencies, my killing, my loving, my stealing, my music are not from the parents. They're triggered maybe by their behavior, but they're mine, and I got born with them and they were triggered a few weeks before I even died in the past life. Third bank vault of karmic seeds that were triggered at that time of death is called experiences similar to the cause, which we've talked about already, all the stuff that happens to us at the hands of others, pretty much that. But we're very social beings, aren't we? So because karma is a natural law, It can't be random. Nothing can be random. It is an impossibility to meet anyone you haven't met before. It's an impossibility for someone to love you or hate you if you haven't done that yourself before. It's an impossibility. It just doesn't work that way. It's like a seed, suddenly a flower growing in your garden without a seed. It's not possible. It's a shock to us because we think most of life is random. We think someone else made it. And I'm not being rude if you have faith in a creator, because you know that God created the world and there is a plan, but God has it and you don't mind not knowing it and you trust God. Nothing wrong with that. That's not the Buddha's view. There's no secret hidden conspiracy theory about who caused things. Each of us causes our own experiences. So that's why each of us can change it. That's the powerful thing. So this third lot of karmic seeds that were triggered before we even died is called experience, that will be producing our experiences. Who we meet, how they see us, how they treat us, the rat that eats our toe, the man who rapes you, the person who gives you $1 million, whatever the experience is, labeled happy or suffering. And look at your life, either one of those. They are the result of your past actions. Like that, pretty much to them. Karma's personal. This is shocking to hear. Who would have thought all this? Fourth is called environmental karma. We don't float around in the sky, do we? All beings have their own type of environment. And we look on this planet, we can see it. Some people have the most gorgeous environment. I remember going to Switzerland. It's really true. Switzerland is clean. I went to Zurich. It is really clean, I promise you. It really is clean. It's amazing, Switzerland. It is clean. They've got some karma, that's environmental karma of past virtue. We know some places are so polluted you can't believe it. That's the result of killing. Collective karma of all those people. Every way we experience the environment, and again, comes down to it as either pleasant or unpleasant. It's a way of framing the entirety of all our experiences in terms of happiness and suffering, and there are causes of all this. And guess what? Each one of us, in terms of the rebirth we get, the tendencies we've got in our mind, the experiences we have at the hands of others, and even the environment, the way it impacts upon us. Main cause, each one of us. Every dog, every monkey, every ant. That's it. It's not a complicated concept, but pretty shocking, only because it's not what we think. We have another view. We have other views. We have other views about things. So, of course, no one's forcing us to think this, but if we want to know about Buddhism and want to try, we need to know these bare bones, at least these facts. So the only reason to know this is a revelation. This is the cause of who I am and why, all the good things as well. And this now gives me the methods to know how to navigate my own damn life and create the life I want. Pull out the weeds and grow the flowers. That's the point. Are we communicating? I'm sure we are. Listen, we said we'd have a break in 2 hours, but I think we can have a break now, Andrew. I don't know, because I talk so fast and so shouting and so loud. It might be good to have a break. What do you think? Unless there's any questions in the chat there, Andrew?
No questions in the chat, but if anyone has one, feel free to unmute.
Yeah, exactly about what I've just talked about. We're going to go unpack it later, and we'll talk about how we purify it, and then we're going to get into how to unravel our emotions, because that's the second main cause of suffering, the delusions. That's where the nitty-gritty is. We're going to get there.
So, Robina.
Yes.
Here.
Yes, Lorna.
So.
Wait a minute. I can't see Lorna. I've got Virginia in front of me. Where's Lorna?
Hello, I'm right here.
Oh, there you go, darling. Good. Talk to me, sweetheart.
So I've always wondered about, people who have really nice lives.
That's right.
But yet they don't practice
That's
in
right.
their nice lives.
That's right.
Passion or helping others.
That's right. We see that, don't we?
All the time. So can they use up their good?
Darling, absolutely. So let me explain first. Good, perfect point, Lorna. These 4 ways that our karma ripens, they don't all come together at the same time. That's why you're going to have people with bad tendencies, right? Due to past habits. And then there's another bank vault of seeds that are now ripening as their very pleasant experiences. Equally, you can have people who have very good tendencies, but having really terrible experiences. You understand that? Can you see that? So yes, absolutely. Every time any one of us has even the moment of happiness, that's the fruit of a past virtuous seed. And every time it ripens, you just finish that seed. So yes, of course, you use up. Every second we are using up all of our virtuous karmic seeds, but using them up and forgetting to grow more. So we're eating up all your veggies, feeling so lucky, but forget to grow more veggies. Do you understand? Absolutely yes, Lorna. And that's really when we start to look into the more nitty-gritty of how we approach practice, and we'll go into this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have,
Yes, darling. Talk to me.
I'm not sure I can put this clearly. Okay, there are people who believe in fate, that things are going to happen the way they're going to happen no matter what we do. And then we're talking about karmic seeds and previous lifetimes. Where is it in this process that we can make changes to change the future? I don't understand.
Not a problem at all. Fate, the Buddhist view, you can't have such a thing as fate. That's too concrete. It's impossible. That's like saying you plant a seed in your ground, and once you put it in the ground, there's nothing you can do. You can't pull it out. You can't weed it. You can't prune it. That is beyond. Things like that can't exist. So fate is a completely extreme, concrete, impossible way for things to be. It's far more subtle and nuanced than that. It's called cause and effect. We know everything's highly volatile. You put a seed in the ground, you discover it was the wrong seed, and before it ripens, you can pull the damn thing out, can't you? It's so simple. So botany is cause and effect, and we never think it's fatalistic. But that's a bizarre idea in Buddhism. There's such a thing as fatalistic. It's very heavy.
So if everything is a ripening of past seeds.
Like in the garden. Everything in your garden is a ripening of past seeds, right?
Where we
Okay, Virginia, would you agree everything in a garden, every time it pops up, it's the ripening of past seeds? Would you agree with that principle? Go on, so what's your question? Keep it to gardens, purposely make it the garden, because it's the same analogy. So now ask me the question about the garden.
Okay, if my working in the garden today was because of ripening seeds in a past life.
Sorry, no, I don't get that. What do you mean by that?
Oh,
No, we're not doing that. That's not the discussion. We're discussing in this life, there's a person called Virginia who has done actions in the past. She's like the garden, really. You're the garden, baby. And so things are ripening in you and your life. So then every one of those is a fruit of a past seed you did. So if you learn to know that why someone punched you in the nose is because you must have been mean in the past. So you think, do I like that? And you think, no, I don't. So I'm going to stop punching in so you stop growing those future seeds. You've got the punch now, you can't change it, but you will not create more of those punches. Every time you see weeds in your garden, you realize you must have planted it. You pull it out and you make a vow not to grow it again. Every time you see vegetables in your garden, you rejoice. You think, how marvelous, how fortunate, I must have grown these veggies. I'm going to grow more veggies. That's the approach in your life.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
All right, yes, thank you.
Does it make sense?
I think
That's the
so.
principle. It's highly dynamic. There's no karma we can't change. There's no seed you plant that, and if it hasn't grown yet, that you can't do something with. Once it's grown, you can't change it, but you can learn from it.
That's it.
It's a highly dynamic process. That's the point. Yeah. Can you see? You see, fatalism is no such concept. Fatalism is fundamentalism, and it's not nothing can be like that. But once you've done it, there's nothing you can do to change it. That's utterly not, it's too concrete. There's no interdependence there. There's no nuance. It's just not possible for things to be this way. And if we analyze our daily life, we'll know that's not true. In other words, saying it's fatalistic means if I've created the cause to have you punch me, that means, nothing can ever change. I mean, that's it. We know our life is not like that. We know it's not like that. Sometimes the suffering is so bad that no matter what you do, it won't change. But it's still things we can do that will certainly have a fruit for the future. It's highly dynamic, highly sophisticated, highly nuanced. Very dynamic is the key point, not fixed, but it's a law. It's not just random. Either we have it's all random or it's fatalistic. They're way too extreme, both of them. It's more nuanced than that.
Brian, you had a question?
Oh, yeah. Robina.
Yes, Brian. Hello,
Hi, good to see you.
Yes.
So when we talk about volition and karma creation, talking about the mental factor, or we're talking about one of the aggregates of the mind?
That's it, the mental factor, baby. That's it, the mental factor. That's the one.
Okay.
But the thing is, the aggregate, often called volition, that's just not quite accurate. It's actually called another term. What is it called? There's another one. There's a package of things.
Like mental composition or
that's
compositional
exactly right.
factors.
Tibetans often refer to it as volition or intention because of the importance of that. but it's not really at the name. Technically, it's not the aggregate. It's one of the aggregates. But intention is the mental factor. Absolutely, and it's there every second. And that's the meaning of the word karma, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Compositional factors. Compositional factors. In other words, you've got form, which is the body. You've got feeling and discrimination, which play two of the mental factors, which play a major role in all of our lives. That's why Buddha plucked them out and gave them special focus. The third is the fourth is all, compositional, all the grab bag of the leftover bits and pieces, including intention in there. But because of intention being so powerful, the Tibetans tend to call that group intention, but it's not technically right. And then the fifth is consciousness. Do you understand?
Yes. Yeah, it's a part of them.
That's right. Exactly. That's right, Brian. Yes. That's it.
Okay. We actually have a few more questions. So
go for it. Come on then. Let's go.
Aaron, you want to jump in?
Aaron, where are you?
I'm here.
Hello, hello, sweetheart. Talk to me.
Hi, Venerable. When you were talking about the environment, I was just sort of wondering, and I don't think I've ever heard this answered, is that how, if you look at science, everything down to the tiniest particles all the way to the universe, all this amazing stuff is going on. What creates that? Because most Christians would say, okay, that's evidence of God. In the Buddhist mind, it's you created you, but everything that you are around in the realm that you land in, where does all that come from?
A really good question, Aaron. I'll tell you. Okay, I'll explain. So especially in the Vajrayana system, the more advanced presentation of Buddha's view of the universe, there especially, this is where this is described. This is actually the same system that the Tibetan medical system uses. So according to that model of the universe in the Vajrayana, the universe consists of really two things: consciousnesses, trillions and trillions and trillions of minds, which are not physical, and then matter. And matter is made of the four elements. Okay, that's how they present it, and they still talk that way. The four elements. So, and the crucial point is this: every mind, every consciousness, which is what a person is, every mind is inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. In other words, every mind is inextricably linked to its own set of the four elements. And this is the way we understand karma. So, as Lama Zopa says, in the Kala Chakra Tantra, in the Vajrayana teachings, there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. So internal is our mind. Okay. So all beings, whether you're in the hell realm, whether you're a spirit, animal, human, God, this whole spectrum of types of sentient beings, all who are experiencing the fruits of their past actions, all of us have a mind, and we have our own set of the four elements. We can see this. So this is the bag of bones we have here. But now at a subtle level, we've got gross consciousness and gross body, this bag of bones. Then we have subtle consciousness, which is our mental consciousness, all our thoughts and feelings and emotions. They're like subtle. And they are inextricably linked to this subtle physical energy we have, which they describe in great detail, like I said, in the Tibetan medical system. You've got the 74,000 subtle channels, 84,000. I forget, 72,000 something, subtle channel, like a subtle nervous system, the length of your body. And coursing through all those channels is this subtle wind energy of the four elements, the subtle wind or prana. And all of those different winds are connected to your different states of mind. I mean, this is clearly not how we think in our world, quite different. But so then, as Lama Zopa says, when you're angry, for example, just the thought of anger, the thoughts, that naturally it creates a tendency to keep being angry. You program your mind with more thoughts to be angry. But what it does also is impact upon those particular wind energies. And so it pollutes your physical wind energies. Now, karmically, eventually that keeps getting stronger and stronger. And that's what sickness is. That manifests in the future as your sickness, your imbalance of all your wind energy, so you get physical sickness. And then even longer term, it impacts upon the kind of body you get. So lots of killing, lots of stealing, lots of harming. And then you die and you run like a magnet to a lion mother's womb. And your mind now, along with becomes a lion body. But not only even that, even more over longer term, that anger impacting upon those wind energies eventually impacts upon the external elements, and that's environments. So this environment that's, say, very beautiful, is the karmic result of virtue, of different kinds of virtue, depending on the type of environment, of every single one of those beings who's experiencing that environment now. But it's probably from 1 million years ago, 1 million lifetimes ago. Environmental karma is much longer term. So everything, the way the environment is, the physical elements, and then the elements of the body connected to the mind, everything is driven by the mind. Everything is driven by the mind, and everything is our own karmic appearance. So you could argue a hell being, which we think is like hysterical, is a being who out of negativity, much programming of negativity, much killing, much harming, they're reborn and their mind is like conjoined with fire element, and they have the karmic appearance of incredible suffering. As Lamia, she says, hell is not some place where the devil is waiting, like some place you get an aeroplane to, where the devil is waiting for you. He says, no, it's the manifestation of the negative tendencies and energy of that suffering sentient being that impacts upon their wind energies and their physical and produces their future. We all produce the entire universe, and it's a natural law. You don't have to be clever to do it. It's not a creator concept. It's just a natural law over eons of time.
Wow. Thank you, Venerable.
That's roughly the explanation.
Thank you so much.
To take this view, we have to take the view that consciousness is not physical. We have to take the view that everything we think and do and say leaves imprints. We have to take the view that all those minds are connected to their own set of the 4 elements. And we have to take the view that impacts upon the external. I mean, there's no external world from its own side, in other words. Everything is the fruit of the karma of sentient beings who experience it. So even just your Tibetan doctor, when she feels your pulses, this is the system in Tibetan medicine. They study it 12, 13 years. All the different winds, all the different states of mind, all the past karma. So the really good doctors, like the high yogi doctors, they can see exactly which life you did certain actions. They can see exactly which delusions are causing your suffering. They can see exactly the actions you did, which is impacting upon your wind energies now, which they feel in your pulses. They see the whole picture, you know. It's a very fascinating view. Do you understand?
So does that mean that consciousness is like pervading, like from a particle physics level all the way up to the universe, that it's a consciousness driven?
No, yes, but not like there are individual consciousnesses with our own individual karmic imprints and our own individual wind energy, but by our actions we impact upon those, and then collectively the collective one, we experience the collective environment, you know, or a group of people will all get raped by one group, or a group of people win a lottery. There's collective karma, but each of us, a collection of people, is made up of individuals who've done similar actions, and so will experience similar results. There's no consciousness outside the individual consciousness. There's no kind of creator consciousness or one consciousness that's doing it all. There's nothing like that. Do you understand?
Yes. So no, like Brahman or
no, nothing like that. Nothing like that, darling.
Great. Thank you so much, Venerable.
Good, sweetheart. This is really helpful. Thank you, sir. So let's have a break. Any more questions? One more. Couple more.
You let us know when you want to stop. But Carol, did you want to jump in with your question on karma?
Go on then. Where are you, sweetheart? Carol's not there.
Okay, Carol, text me or message me if you want to ask later.
Yes, ask me. Say it. Read it out.
Okay. Is Carol there? Let's see here. Okay, Carol, can you hear us?
I can see her, but she's muted. She needs to unmute.
Okay.
You unmute her, can't you? Can't you unmute her? You can do it, Andrew.
Actually, okay, Carol, can you start now? We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My question had to do with karmic, collective karmic. If you take like the Rohingya right now who are suffering so terribly, and how is that created? I guess initially that every single one of them had created that kind of a karmic experience, and how can that be changed? How can collective karma be changed?
Exactly, it's a really good point. So, you know, and it's the same for happy things. What town do you live in?
Laguna Beach, California.
So you can agree, wouldn't you, in general, that Laguna Beach is not a bad environment, is it?
It's a beautiful environment. I feel very blessed to be here.
Exactly. So you can, let's just forget about the Rohingya. Why not look at look at the participants, look at the occupants of Laguna Beach? Your collective karma, all of you. So first of all, collective karma, all of you, to have a reasonable environment, to have a lovely ocean there, to have nice things happen, to have delicious food in the shops, to have fairly pleasant neighbors, to have good roads, good cars, good machines, good possessions, good houses. You agree? It's exactly the same. The collective karma of all of you from your past. So different things. So for example, if you're not much pollution there, that's the result collectively of all of you. It could be from 50,000 lifetimes ago, of particularly of non-killing as a group. As a group, you would have been together and you had a particular morality of non-killing. So all of you now experiencing the results environmentally of non-killing, but the water and the food and the air at least not polluted. So everything is like that. So the same with unhappy things happening. I mean, all the Tibetans right now, they're at the hands of the Chinese communists, experiencing the collective karma of their own past actions from probably 1,000 lifetimes ago. And the thing is, they wouldn't have been Tibetans or Buddhists or communists then. It's just a new, it's just another group of people now. So you got you look at Israel. I was thinking of this little tiny piece of land. You can jog across it. It's so small. But look at the intensity of the different groups there and the dramas, the collective karma of these different groups from thousands of lifetimes ago, sharing that tiny piece of earth. We can see it everywhere we turn because we do things as groups, don't we? So we experience the fruit of groups. So it's very hard to change collective karma unless you collectively agree to do it, but you can change your own personal one. So next life you'll be born in a different group. That's the point.
Okay.
My point.
Okay, yeah. I think one more question here. Yeah. Lynn, did you want to jump in?
And then we can have our break. Absolutely good idea. Go, Lynn.
Hi, yes, sorry.
Hello, sweetheart. Yes, Lynn, talk to me.
Okay, so my question is so as long as the negative seeds, if could it be completely eliminated before?
Would you start the whole question again, Lynn?
So for our seeds that we plant in the past, the negative
seeds we planted in the past. Okay, go on then.
Especially the negative ones. Are we able to completely eliminate it before it ripens?
Okay, put it this way. If these practices we're about to talk about don't enable us to do that, give up right now, Lynn. It's a disaster. Of course, the answer is yes. It's called purification. We're going to be discussing that. If not, it's a nightmare. It's just called fatalism. If you can't pull out the seeds before they ripen, then we might as well just die now. It's a disaster. Of course we can. That's the whole point of practice.
So then that also means the stuff that we do now, it could also potentially, the bad stuff we do today, could potentially remove some of our good seeds we've planted in the past as well?
Of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. Every time your weeds grow, they're going to suffocate the flowers, aren't they? I mean, the seeds are still going to be there. You can't eliminate completely, or you can never eliminate the good seeds, but you can stop them from growing for a long time if we keep growing all the weeds. But we can pull out the weeds completely eventually. That's the reason we can become a Buddha. There's no negativity left. We've purified all of it. So we're in this discussion about karma, we're now going to go how we practice it. And then we have to look at the second practice, which is really crucial, which is how we purify the karma we've already planted before it ripens. We've got to keep ahead of the game, That's the point.
Thank you so much.
Good, darling. So let's have a break, Andrew, shall we?
Okay, great, everyone. We'll take a 1 hour break, grab some snacks, lunch, drinks, and I'll leave the chat open, the Zoom session here, so you're welcome to stay logged in, and we'll start back up at 1 o'clock Pacific, so 1 hour from now.
Okay, sweetheart. See you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Okay, darlings. Thank you. to it, and then it goes a little bit deeper, and then we hear it, and hearing it more deeply means we hear it more clearly. We keep getting more wisdom about it. It gets clearer and clearer and clearer. It's very important. Thinking like that. So just to summarize what we were talking about so far, in relation to unraveling our emotions, we started with the word Buddha, which tells us where we're heading, which implies the methodology, which means we have to know the mind, because that's where delusions exist, which we can get rid of, and that's where the virtues exist, which we can perfect. So we understand the Buddha's view of the mind. It's not the handiwork of a creator. It's not physical, not the handiwork of mummy and daddy, can't come from nothing. So the conclusion is, the deduction is, it's beginningless and endless, as mad as that sounds. And it's the product of the law of cause and effect. No one's running it. There's no boss out there. We're doing it ourselves. And this itself is quite a shocking concept, because we really feel, we don't feel as if we're creating ourselves. We really feel we're the product of other people, events, situations. This is a very powerful point, actually. We feel that. I think we don't even need to have been told it. I mean, it's reinforced by our scientific views and our psychology. That's the feeling of ego. The feeling of ego is like somehow everything is done to us, with this innocent victim that plods along and things happen. Good luck and bad luck, because we actually use those concepts. That's the feeling of how ego functions, So, so the Buddhist, like I said, Buddha's saying we've got this potential, and this potential exists in our mind. So the essential job of being a Buddhist is to know your mind. But the thing is, okay, so what we're doing here, we're seeing all this now in the framework of this findings of the Buddha, his first presentation as a result of it. Once he got enlightened, once he got wisdom and got compassion all unified, became himself a Buddha. He then presented his first teaching framed in terms of suffering and happiness, how to stop suffering, how to get happiness, which, as I said, is one of the ways of framing the entirety of Buddhism. So the first of these four truths for the facts, for the noble ones, is that there is suffering. Three kinds: suffering of change, suffering, and all pervasive. We're looking at even just the first one, the one we all recognize immediately when the bad things happen, speaking very simply. Then the second of these four facts about life is that there are causes of suffering. This is pretty incredible. He's presenting his causes, and the point of this is to discover why we're suffering now, but the crucial point is how to apply it for the future, because we know we don't want suffering in the future. So you learn botany to explain to you what's in the garden now, but the point of it becomes a tool that you use to know what you want to do with your garden in the future, because what's in there now is now, you learn from it, and the action point is, what can I do to get the future garden that I can be in control of? This is the point. So then we look at the causes, and as we said, Buddha's essentially pointing out two main causes. When you study Buddhist philosophy, there's very extensive in the understanding of cause and effect. All kinds of different kinds of causes, main causes, substantial causes, secondary causes, all kinds, and it's really quite precise. And it's a crucial point to understand. Just in the same way that I said before, if you want a flower, many conditions have to come together, but the central one, the main one, the crucial one, the main cause is the seed. Pretty clear. Same here, happiness and suffering. So one way of framing all of our experiences, as I said before, we can see it in our lives, is in terms of happiness and suffering, levels of each of these, So two main causes, as far as Buddha is concerned, of our suffering, and it's good to remind us there are two main causes of our happiness as well. We can forget that and get very depressed and forget all about happiness and just get caught up in all the misery. But it's important to remember, botany doesn't refer just to weeds. Botany refers to all gardens, all flowers and weeds and herbs, And really the seeds and fruits one is a great analogy, and Buddha uses that all the time. So we first have to identify suffering. And in this case, it's pretty straightforward in terms of our life. Although the bigger picture point of view, as I said, the Buddha's view would be that there are different realms of existence that are considered to be this suffering. Some realms of existence that are really intense suffering. Humans is not one of them. Human is actually an example of a good rebirth, which is that's called the suffering of change. It's the result of virtue, but it's still a subtler level of suffering. But the way we're talking here is the more limited view, which is within this life itself, because we understand it more easily. So it's pretty straightforward when the bad things happen. And usually, if you look into your life, I said before, remember there are four ways that our karma ripens. One is a type of rebirth. The next one is our tendencies in our mind. And the third is all the stuff that happens to us. And so the third and the fourth, the stuff that happens to us usually in relation to others. It's pretty much like that. It's not always exactly like that. And then fourthly is the very physical world that we occupy. So we look into our lives right now, use the example of coronavirus. You know, this literally the whole world. I mean, literally the whole world, isn't it? Not everyone else has the same experience. It's very clear. And there seems to be two main sufferings we're having now. Well, several, isn't it? One type of suffering for some people is isolation. Another kind of suffering for people is literally sickness or death. Another kind of suffering is, of course, the economic one for many, many people. But on the other hand, some people are getting rich. I mean, apparently Mr. Jeff Bezos, you know, Amazon, they're bringing in $15,000 a second. So they're really making money as a result of this. So lots of people we can see, their generosity karma is ripening like crazy, and they're getting richer by the minute. Whereas we can see it's all the poor people who don't have businesses and things, don't have companies that can who are fortunate enough to be able to continue to open. They're the ones who are all, you know, they're the ones who are suffering. And that's the karmic result of, so Mr. Jeff Bezos, you know, Amazon, the karma of getting richer is the result of his own past generosity. All those people, that company itself, that group of people got the karmic connection together, the collective karma to get rich, all those, you know, the stockholders in Amazon getting richer. It's a collective karma of past generosity. And that kind of karma is called experiences similar to the cause. Experiences similar to the cause is sort of what happens to you. Forget the physical environment. So it's usually in relation to sentient beings, you know. So the result of stealing, for example, is you lose your job. You lose your money. People don't pay their debts. You're poor. The result of generosity is you get things. People give things to you. So for some of the people, it's sickness. Well, there's two results of killing. Well, three results. One is a tendency to kill, and most of us might not have that. So we're not experiencing that particularly at the moment, unless you go and kill somebody. But in terms of the sicknesses going on right now, the world one, the experience similar to the cause of past killing is that you get sick or you die young. That's very specific. You get sick or you die young. But look at, you get killed. Sorry, you get killed or you die young. You get killed or you die young. Well, mostly now, no one's killing you, but you're dying young. So getting sick, that's the environmental result of killing. Now, that's very common right now, isn't it? And the other very fascinating thing, the environmental result of killing would be the food and the water itself or the air are polluted, like I said before. But have a look at this, the intensity of the suffering we're having now environmentally, even other human beings. Not just the food, but other human beings, our beloved friends are the cause of us dying. That's a really heavy-duty collective karma environmentally of past killing. No one intends to kill you. You know, that person who's got COVID-19 you get close to because you're the nurse taking care of them. They're not intending to kill you, but just you're touching them. You die as a result. That's kind of heavy-duty karma. Think about it. I always say, you know, in Queensland, in Australia, there was this creature, a type of toad that was brought in as an antidote to some other kind of creature that was eating all the sugar cane, but in the end it ends up being its own problem. It's called a cane toad, and apparently it's so poison, any animal who eats it will die an agonizing death. So it's almost like that now. We are actually poison for each other. That's the environmental result of past killing, that even our own friends, our own family, human beings who normally we hug or say thank you to, are actually the cause of our death. That's pretty intense karma, I'd say. It's very fascinating. That's the environmental result of collective past killing. It's very fascinating. So the thing is, in other words, none of this, there are all the external conditions. You know, like, so Wes punching me in the nose is definitely one of the causes of my suffering. And we think it's the main one, but no, it's only a secondary one. That's more like the water or the sunshine. The main cause is the seed which I planted in relation to him in the past, that then ripens. And equally his kindness, his generosity to me is giving me a gift. It certainly plays a role in my happiness, but not the main cause. This is the crucial point the Buddha's making. It's a cooperative cause. The main cause is my past generosity. So in other words, the Buddha's approach is putting us in the center of our lives. It's quite a powerful concept, actually. External world, of course, it plays a role, but it's kind of really powerful, interesting view that puts each individual being as the central player in their own experiences. And it takes a while to get to this because we somehow feel like a victim. We feel like, well, happiness comes from out there. We feel like something comes from out there. I'm always kind of looking, where is it, you know? It's very fascinating. This one demands internal attention. It's a very powerful concept. And it's incredibly empowering if we can hear it properly. Not, oh, you mean I'm bad, which is the guilty way we talk. No, on the contrary, it's like it's liberating because I'm the one who can change it. I'm the one who can do it, is the point. So powerful. So, okay, then the second cause of suffering, which is really the main one, because the two subsumed to this one, is the delusions, the negative states of mind. So this is where we have to understand the mind now. This is how we get to unraveling our emotions, if you like. So in terms of Buddhist practice, you know, I mentioned often enough, this way of packaging the Tibetans over the centuries, since, I mean, Buddhism's been there since like the 7th century. And they package the teachings in a very particular way. So Atisha, this person who came along from India, a great scholar and yogi, came along in the 11th century and spent the last 15, 18 years of his life in Tibet. And he wrote this little text that really kind of took all the essential points of this vast body of knowledge, of all the metaphysics, all the psychology, all the philosophy, all the practice, and put all the teaching, took the experiential point from all that vast body of knowledge and presented in this nice orderly way in terms of how you would practice this stuff in the order that you would practice it. So as we know very well, if we are familiar with the Tibetan Buddhist literature, and if we know Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for example, my teacher, he's very respectful of the lineage, so how he says the words in English in a very polite, respectful way. So, you know, that we know that this Lam Rim, as they call it in Tibetan, a gradual path. You know, it's a course, actually. We say the word course, we understand that psychologically. So with any course, you know, you begin, and I'll use the analogy of junior school. You start in junior school, you go to high school, you go to university and postgraduate. It works for our mind because we get those concepts. But the correct way to say it, in translating from the Tibetan, is the way Lama Zopa very respectfully would translate. The first level of teachings, which I refer to as junior school, they're the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. I mean, that's quite a mouthful, isn't it? And then the next level of practice, and I call that high school, these are the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability. So that's the wisdom wing. That's the wisdom wing. That's the nuts and bolts of what we just discussed so far. So if we're going to practice karma, that's junior school. And I'll show you the logical reason for that. Then now we go to high school and we start to get to the mind. So in other words, karma, the law of karma, law of cause and effect, is everything we think and do and say. So seeds in the mind. It produces our future. We create ourselves. So in this very first level of practice, given that we're driven by these delusions, Buddha says, join the universe here, then we have to control, I like to say it this way, we have to control the servants of our delusions. And what's that? The body and speech, isn't it? That's our behavior, isn't it? Look, we're embodied beings, aren't we? We have body and we have speech. We have actions of body and speech. Look at it. So with these, we affect others, don't we? So the very first level of, and this is what Lama Zopa says, entry-level junior school, grade 1, immediate level of practice. Given that what I think and do and say produces my future, and given that I don't want suffering and do want happiness, then it follows logically the very first level of practice, don't even go anywhere near the mind yet, is control my body and my speech, control the servants of my mind. So the very first level of practice, Buddha exhorts us, the first 7 little things. He suggests at least don't kill, don't take the ungiven, as Tibetans would call stealing, and don't jump on the wrong partner. In other words, 3 simple actions that are fairly broad-based, but are actions that really do harm others: killing, stealing, and raping or harming or cheating on partners. In other words, actions that of our body driven by anger and attachment, let's face it. So there's 37 million actions that are driven by anger and attachment that harm others, but at least start with these, which at least to start refraining from harming sentient beings. This is already profound meaning, you know. So like I always talk, and it's important again to remember the way to hear this, and this is where we make big mistakes in Western society, in modern society. As soon as we hear someone say, don't do that, especially when it comes to morality and ethics, we get resentful. We either do it out of fear, and why? Because we don't want to be punished. It's pretty clear. And we do the good thing because we want to be rewarded. We have this very strong philosophical view in our mind, deep in our bones, that is to do with punishment and reward. And it's universal. But the Buddha says it's a function of ego. It's not a very sound basis. And again, I'm not being rude, but in our religions, it's exactly that. And I'm not being rude, it is that. I always quote this. I quote my Catholic priest friend. And I asked him, what by definition is a sin? In other words, what makes an action a bad action? Like we understand, you know. It was very clear, the answer, and this is really important to understand. It's because God said not to do it. That's what makes it wrong. So what makes killing wrong, the priest said, is the fact that God said not to do it. And that's reasonable because God is the boss. If you have the view of a creator who made the universe, who runs everything, who created the laws, who created me, and the simple level of it, you know, we can talk about him as being, you know, the person whom you obey. It's clear. Like in my mother's household, she's the boss. It's reasonable. And why do I do what she says? Because she said to do it. And if I didn't do it, why is it wrong? Because she said to do it and I didn't do it. So we get that level of morality. And in a way we function well. We have our society like that. Don't do this, don't do that, don't go more than 70 miles an hour, otherwise you get punished. We get that. But the Buddha suggests we've got to go further. It's more fundamental. His view of ethics is more fundamental. Buddha's not a creator, therefore he's not a punisher, therefore he's not a rewarder. There's no concept in Buddhism like that. Sure, you can have it in your own household, and if I'm living in a monastery, there are rules, and if I'm naughty, they'll throw me out, but not from this fundamental point of view of fundamental ethics. From the Buddhist point of view, fundamental ethics is a natural law. So from the Buddhist point of view, he exhorts us, just like Jesus does, to not kill, not steal, not lie. A good communist would do the same thing. But what the basis of the instruction is the difference. Buddha is not a creator. Therefore, he has no power to punish or reward. He would forgive you if you ask him to forgive you. So if I'm a Catholic, and this is reasonable, I would have to ask God to forgive me. And this is the point now. Listen to this. It's the forgiveness that purifies me. This is a powerful concept. This is not the Buddha's view. Buddha would forgive you. He's a nice person. But for the Buddha, that's like going to your doctor and she says to you, don't smoke. Why not? Because you will get cancer. So we know that's a natural law. She doesn't give you cancer. She doesn't punish you with cancer. That's the view of punishment and reward. We know that doesn't exist. It's natural law, sickness, but she advises you out of her experience. So it's equally absurd, wouldn't it be, if you did smoke and you'd go to your doctor and please doctor, please forgive me, and thinking that the forgiveness will cure your cancer. We know that is not how it is. That's the Buddha's view about karma. It's a natural law. No one runs it. No one made it up. He's observed it. We live according to this, and we better learn the laws. So if you don't want suffering, don't smoke. If you don't want suffering in the future, don't kill. It's the same logic. Because what you do and say and think harms you. Of course, the very first reason is for your own sake. Eventually, you don't kill out of compassion. That comes second. You've got to have compassion for yourself first. This is why we gloss over this. We miss this in the West. We leap over, oh yeah, I'm not really suffering. I'd rather have compassion for other people. But if we don't understand Four Noble Truths, if we don't understand what karma is, if we don't understand that everything I think and do and say is the cause of my suffering and my happiness, then we will never have renunciation of suffering and its causes. We'll just say, oh yeah, okay, blah, blah, you know. This is the piece we miss most in our culture. Or we misinterpret it and think it's punishment and reward, and they end up feeling guilty, like a little child, you know. Guilt has no sense of responsibility. Guilt is just concrete, and guilt is the same as anger. It's blame, except you're the person. How dare you did this and you did this and you did this and you're a bad person. That's anger. I did this and I did that and I did this and I'm a bad person. That's guilt, and it's anger. It's a useless state of mind. It's extreme, it's concrete, there's no interdependence there, and there's no responsibility. It's the mind of a child, you know, which is how we are. So it's hard to get past it because we are very familiar with guilt. You know, it's a meaningless state of mind. So the view of karma then, the Buddha exhorts us to not kill, lie, steal, and then 4 of the speech. Don't lie. Don't use harsh language. Don't badmouth behind backs, and don't rabbit on about nothing. 4, 7 little things of the body and speech. And the point is, why does Jesus ask us not to do these? Very simple answer, because God said. Why does Buddha exhort us to not to do these things? Because guess what, Robina? They will harm you. Same as your doctor. That's what we have to become familiar with. That has to be the basis of wanting to be a better person, because you want to turn yourself into a better person. We have to get used to that one. It's very profound and it's very grown up, because we realize we're in charge of ourselves. I mean, we have the idea, we're so ridiculous. We have the idea, like, you know, like just the same with the smoking one. I think of smoking as my doctor telling me off, don't you smoke, thinking that she's going to punish me. So when I go home and there's no doctor, I think, oh, it's okay, I can smoke. I can bring out the Marlboros. Oh, I won't get cancer. She doesn't see me. People would laugh at us because we know it's a natural law. That's karma. It's a natural law. We become our own boss. We become grown up. We become mature. And that view, as we grow it and grow it and grow it, becomes the basis of our morality in life, because we are sick of suffering. Why would I want to cause myself to be a ridiculous person? Of course I wouldn't. It's we can't leap over karma and just leap into compassion. It's unstable. The compassion we have without an understanding of suffering and my causes of my suffering, and wanting to give up that, this is the basis of my becoming more dignified, self-respectful person, then stable compassion for others, because we're now able to look at the deeper level of suffering, not just feel sorry for the poor and the little animals and the little innocent children. We'll have compassion for everybody, because we're all in the same boat, all causing our own suffering. And even from that point of view, you'd have, if you know, look, you're dealing with some children and you've got one kid who's the bully and one kid who's the victim. Of course, you have compassion for the victim, but when you understand karma, you'd have even more compassion for the bully, because they're causing themselves future suffering. And the victim is just finishing the suffering. You have compassion for both and help them both. It's a much broader, more profound view of compassion, and it's based on understanding the law of cause and effect, that we all create our own realities. So junior school entry level is back off and don't harm sentient beings. Protect yourself and don't harm others. Profound level of practice already. The next level of practice in relation to karma, which has brought up the point before, Lynn's point, given that we've got countless past lives, given there are trillions of karmic seeds in my bank vaults that are sitting there latent, waiting for the condition to ripen as suffering, then it follows, because I don't want future suffering. First level of practice is don't cause more suffering. Don't stop sowing poison seeds. The next one is let's put atomic bombs under the seeds we've already planted before they ripen. That's called purification. And this is one of the powerful practices. Psychologically, again, keep remembering this is psychological. It's not, you know, religion, doing what someone says. We believe that, we feel that. That's the view of ego. We've made that view up, you know. So as Lama Zopa says, we need to do purification at the end of every day. We're insane not to do it. Because remember, if everything we think and do and say sows seeds in the mind, then as Lama Yeshe says, well, we create negativity with the mind. We sow seeds with our mind. So then we purify it by creating positivity with the mind. And there's no karma we can't purify. There's no negative seed we can't pull out before it ripens. So it's getting ahead of the game. And this is the fundamental level of first level of practice. And if you live the life like this with good view, good morality, living in vows of morality, which I talk about, purifying every day, being kind to others, doing a few other actions, like His Holiness said last night, a few extra things on top of those, you know, the 10 non-virtues, practicing the opposite of those, you'd have a really excellent life. And this is just junior school. Now you go to high school. We'll talk about purification. Middle scope, and that's where you get to the mind itself. That's where you start to become intimately familiar with the workings of your own mind. And the fact is, until you've begun to get some harness on the energy of our body and speech, we can't possibly have the luxury to see our mind. If everything you feel just vomits out your mouth, you've got no time to look at your mind. But if you've got control over your mouth and control over your body, and practice every day and purify, you're pulling out some of the weeds, so there's some space now to see what the hell is going on inside your mind. This is the real job. This is where we really home in exactly on Buddhist practice. You know? If we choose, of course, I keep saying that. Excuse me, I need a drink. Okay, now let's look into the mind. Unravel our emotions. Well, mind and consciousness, like I said, broadly are used synonymously in Buddhism. They're referring to all your thoughts, intellect, creativity, your brilliant mind, good at math, good at music, whatever, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, all this huge spectrum, okay, of our inner experiences, consciousness, mind. Because what goes on in the mind is the source of what we do with our body and speech. So control body and speech first, then we can get into the mind. And as we keep improving in this, we get ever more deeply into the mind. So there's two main components in this level of practice. One is you need to study the Buddhist model of the mind. If you choose to, have to say that, if you choose to. It's not the same as Jung or Freud. Very different models. Anybody who studies psychology, you know that. Almost as many people as there are psychologists, as many systems and models that there are in the West. We keep having new ones. And that's fine. People can do what they like. All I'm saying is we're using the Buddhist view here, which is really specific, which has come from these amazing Indians before. And they mapped the mind back then. They had this, there is still that extraordinary view of the contents of the mind. It's really specific, But essentially, if we look into it, we've got, like His Holiness said this last night, we've got sensory consciousness, which is the part of our mind. I'm sorry, excuse me. Part of our mind, it's not physical, remember, that functions through the medium of the senses, the eyeball, the nerves, the tongue, the ear. And just for the record again, I mean, it's important to see this. This is massive, actually. Because we're so addicted to our bodies, and because we think our mind is our body anyway, and because our senses are powerful, I mean, that's how we know we're a person, isn't it? By having sensory experiences. As Lama says, we make the body the boss. Our sensory experiences completely dominate our lives. We know we have thoughts and feelings inside, beyond the senses. We know that. But we don't pay much attention because we can't hear them, because the senses are so loud and bossy and dominating, isn't it? And the only time we notice our thoughts and feelings and emotions is when they rise to the surface very powerfully. And Buddha's got these skills that enable us to go into the mind at a subtler level, to get deeper down beyond the emotions, beyond the senses, to get to see what the hell is going on in there, to unpack and unravel it. This is the actual skill of being a Buddhist. Buddha's very precise approach to the mind. So sensory consciousness is massive, but we give it way more power than it in fact has. I always use the same example, When you study the Buddhist model of the mind, you study the epistemological model and the psychological. We're going to go into the psychological, the contents. But the epistemological is the way mind works. And in the Buddhist view, this is beyond fascinating, because we're not discussing the brain here. It's utterly fascinating. And this has been mapped by these genius Indians, great yogis in the past, before the Buddha, and then indeed the Buddha. Buddha diverged in his own direction and this view of the mind in Buddhism is based upon the findings of these amazing yogis beforehand. They map the mind internally, not with a microscope, with a microscope of their own mind. It's an incredible system, I must say. So anyway, sensory consciousness, we give way more power than it actually has. I always use this as a simple little example. I'll look at my cup and I'll say, what a pretty cup, and I would. It's my thermos cup and I'm attached to it. I chose it on the internet. I like the shape, the design, the color, the feel of it. I'm very happy with it. So, okay, I'll say, what a pretty cup, what a nice cup. But the fact is, we all think, don't we? We all think, when I say that, I see a pretty cup. I hear, nice music. We don't question that. We don't analyze it. But we assume that my eyeball is seeing a pretty cup. We don't question. Buddha says, what a load of rubbish. He doesn't. He's polite, but I'm just saying it. First of all, consciousness is not physical. Second, there is an eyeball, no question. All the nerves are very nicely working. But what gives it the power, what eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, touch consciousness, nose consciousness. Consciousness is not physical. So it's that part of the mind that works with, conjoined with the physical bits and pieces that enables a cognition. Cognition is mind. So, to spell it out, right? So eye consciousness, all the sensory consciousnesses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. So eye consciousness is capable only of cognizing two things, shape and color. That's it. Ear consciousness can only cognize bare sound. So it's obvious if that's the case, and this is the point here. This is huge, actually. You've got to ask the question, then, which part of my mind, my consciousness, cognizes a pretty cup? That's your mental consciousness. Tibetan's point here. That's where the workshop is, as Lama Yeshe says. Your mental consciousness. And that's all your thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious. And that's the work. That's what we have to learn to become intimately familiar with. So now we go to the psychological model of the mind, and this is where we learn about the contents of the mental consciousness. And Buddha divides these into three, classifies into three. It's a very simple model. Those that are neurotic, ego-based, separate, bereft, unhappy, delusional, disturbing, you name it. We know them intimately. Anger, attachment, jealousy, blah, 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 blah. All the variations of these, depression, all this stuff, you know. Buddha actually articulates 84,000 of these, which sounds hilarious, you know. But they're all subsumed to three, which is what, you know, you read in the Buddhist literature, the three poisons, three toxic emotions. And they seem on the face of it kind of cute. They're not how we talk in modern psychology. There's three of them, and they have an intimate hierarchical relationship. The root of them is this, they call it colloquially ego grasping, this primordially deep misconception about the very nature of self. That's running us all the time, deep in our bones, so primordial we don't even notice it. Then on the basis of this sense of a separate, lonely, bereft, unhappy me, fear-based completely, there is attachment to get what that fantasy me wants. And then on the basis of attachment, not getting what it wants, aversion, anger, despair, depression, irritation, annoyance. So attachment and anger are effectively the delusions, neuroses that we run between 1,000 times a day and that are the source of all our other dramas. It's a very precise way that Buddhism articulates these points of states of mind. And of course, this is not how we define them in our culture. We have different models, you know. So we need to understand attachment and anger. And to understand that anger, you've got to understand attachment. So in the end, attachment, effectively, you could say in the Four Noble Truths, is the main cause of our day-to-day suffering, which is such a surprise to us, because this is not our analysis, you know. So we have to understand it. It's crucial. I mean, I always kind of feel almost like a cheat. All I ever do is talk about this. I feel like I keep thinking you're going to catch me one day and you realize I'm just telling you the same thing. It's like that. There's only this much to talk about. We can talk for months on it and never get tired and never cover it completely. As I always quote Lama Yeshe, I could tell you about attachment for one whole year. We never begin to understand it until we start looking deeply into the mind. I mean, it's like every bit of knowledge. You've got to start with a simple definition and then you start putting meat on the bones, don't you? This is how it is. This is how everything is. So then the second category of states of mind, these are our saving grace, thank goodness. These are our virtues, our positive states of mind. And if we think in terms of these emotions, the emotional states of mind, as we understand, love, compassion, kindness, forgiveness, generosity, empathy, one of the marvelous qualities. These are our saving grace. These are actually our human characteristics. All the animals, the Buddhist view of the mind refers to all the animals and other creatures as well, not just humans. The Buddhist model of the mind refers to everybody. So the animals mainly, they have love, and they have, like His Holiness said last night, mummy, you know, the mummy tigers take care of their babies, you know, the animals. But the Buddhist view of the way the delusions work, animals suffer infinitely more than we do because they can't access much virtue. Their minds are very rigid, very stubborn, very fixed. And this is the function of ego grasping. When we've got lots of ego grasping, we're very fixed, very concrete, very fundamentalist, intensely suffering. And that's the animals' minds are 1 billion times more powerful than ours in that way. And they can't access much virtue. They can't do much changing. As we know, leopards can't change their spots. It's a very profound statement, actually. That's the suffering of the animals. We humans, it's a miracle. And look how hard, nevertheless, look how hard it is to access our virtue and to actually apply our virtue and to grow our virtue. Because it seems to be the unhappy ones seem to loom large, don't they? You know, it's very fascinating. So the big job, if the end result, Buddha, free of the rubbish, full of the goodness, free of the delusions, full of the virtues, if that's the end result, then it's obvious the job right now. This is the job. We need to learn to distinguish between them. So like anything, if you're going to, you know, if you want to study, if you want to help people heal using acupuncture, right now I put my hands on where my pulses are when the Tibetan doctors do it, and I try to feel what they're feeling. I haven't got a clue. No idea, like the acupuncturists know, but you've got to start somewhere. I know there are many, many different things there. You feel it, and they put their different fingers, and they do. So you've got to learn that. And you've got to start slowly. You have to learn the names of it, and then you start to become familiar with it. It's the same with your mind. Start with the definitions. There's attachment, there's love, there's anger, there's compassion. One's negative, one's positive. Put them in the right direction. Very simple. Start the definitions. Then you start to practice, becoming familiar with it. That's practice. And you can't get ahead of yourself. You've got to go one step at a time. Learning from your own experiences about what these states of mind are and how they cause you pain. That's the job. So the job is to distinguish between the delusions and the positive, the negative and the positive. That's it. That's the essence of the job. And it's the toughest job we'll ever do, because there's 47 things in our way that prevent us from getting to do this job. The first one, of course, is that, you know, instinctively having ego grasping, the feeling when bad things happen is what's the cause of it out there. That's the major obstacle. We're looking in the wrong direction. Which doesn't mean that Wes didn't punch me in the nose. He did. It doesn't mean that he wasn't kind to me. He was. But we're so fixated on those events to try to find that's the reason for my happiness. That's the reason for my suffering. So we pursue those. The Buddha says, fine, you can do that. But how about going into your mind, changing your mind, working on your mind? That'll get to the root of the problem. It's hard because we're addicted to the opposite job. That's the main reason. So because of that, then all of our materialist models of the mind and our views about the mind emphasize the physical, emphasize the brain, emphasize the genes, the DNA, emphasize the external events. I'm not criticizing. It is true. They're all events. They're all part of the deal. But we miss the fundamental one, which is the actual thoughts and feelings and emotions themselves. It's very hard for us to even hear. We can't even hear it. So in other words, if I'm really upset, you know, I talk to my friend Rosanna. What's wrong, Robina? I'm angry. So tell me about your anger, Robina. And what I'll do is give a detailed description of Wes and how he punched me in the nose. So what I do is talk my anger. So I'm not actually describing anger. What I'm doing is describing Wes through the lens. So my anger is describing Wes. That's what's happening. So she'll say, well, that's Robina, interesting. I've heard you paint a really horrible picture of Wes. I understand. Now tell me about your anger. And I won't even understand her question. I'll just say, well, I just did. No, you didn't. I didn't. I described a person and the description was my anger. My anger described Wes. Evil, horrible, how dare he, I don't deserve it, he did this, he did this, he did this. So it's anger speaking, describing what I think is the main cause, Wes. Now, she says, why are you so happy, Robina? Rosanna says to me. Oh, no, she sees me beaming with happiness because I'm in love with Wes. Tell me about your happiness. And what will I do? I'll describe divine Wes. Through what lens this time? Attachment. So the delusions have the main function of over-exaggerating the truth. They make mountains out of molehills, as our mummies would tell us. This is really hard to see because Wes did punch me in the nose. So I think we think, well, how can I be exaggerating? But what we can't see the difference between is the action that Wes did, punching me in the nose, and my interpretation of the whole of Wes based on that one action. So that I paint the whole of Wes as an ugly, horrible person, in his bones horrible, as if horribleness is coursing in his veins along with his blood. That's what anger does. And then attachment is the same. When I'm in love with Wes and he does kind things to me, the attachment over exaggerates his beauty and his deliciousness and his goodness and his marvelous qualities. And I'm demented and lost the plot and think he's a saint from heaven. And so I will tell Rosanna a deeply detailed description of divine Wes as if I'm describing my happiness. I'm not describing my happiness. Attachment is painting a picture of a saint that does not exist. Anger is painting a picture of a monster that does not exist. So it's really difficult to distinguish between the facts, he did punch me, and my anger describing him, and the fact that he was kind to me and my attachment exaggerating him. It really demands clear inner work. And it's really difficult because the function in Buddhist psychology, the analysis is all the unhappy states of mind, the disturbing ones, attachment, anger, and all the rest, have this particular function of over-exaggerating, of embellishing. And that's why we go up and down like yo-yos, you know? We go berserk. When everything goes beautiful, we go mad. We go up on the up mode, and we go crashing down to despair in the down mode when things go wrong, because our mind is over-interpreting. That's exactly what Buddha is saying. This is what's hard to see. It's extremely hard to see. So that there's one point, the first point, which makes it enormously difficult to want to look into our mind, to even want to look into our mind, is because I believe that he's the problem. He's the cause of my happiness and he's the cause of my suffering. So when he's the cause of my happiness, my attachment's gone mad and manipulates and controls and possesses and interprets all the time and expects him to be perfect every second. And when he doesn't do what my attachment wants, anger kicks in. And we go between these two 1,000 times a day. And we're obsessed with the external. So, why are you suffering, Robina? Rosanna says. But Wes punched me. That's our view. I asked Buddha, why am I suffering, Buddha? He'll say, it's because of your anger, Robina. The answer is so simple, isn't it? He's not denying that Wes punched me. He's not saying he didn't. People saw him, he did. But he's saying, I understand that. Yet, it's part of the conditions, it's one of the causes, but not the main one. It's not the main cause, Robina, it's a secondary one, it's a catalyst. The main cause of your suffering, Robina, is your anger right now, this second. Now, the answer is very simple. These are simple words, but we literally can't hear it. We literally can't hear it because we have an analysis that says the anger is coming from something else. That Wes made me angry. My mother behaved this way. It made me anger. I got it from my mother and father. They gave me anger. That's how we think. Buddha says, nonsense. You brought it with you, precious girl. It's a habit. So his answer, when I say, why am I angry? The world's answer will be because Wes punched me. And I asked Buddha, why am I angry? His answer is so simple, we literally can't hear it. He says, well, Robina, darling, it's a habit in your mind, and it's because you were angry before. I'll say, I know I was angry before, Buddha, but why was I angry before? Because we keep wanting an external answer. We keep looking like a needle in a haystack. That's why when we go to our therapist, we look in the past. What happened to Robina when she was little? We believe there's a first big bang cause of my anger. We always want a first cause. We look into the past for the first big bang, you know. What happened we look for this needle in a haystack, buried deep in my youth. We'll find it if we keep looking. That's why we keep talking about what mummy did and what daddy did and what the Catholic nuns did. That's our analysis. And the Buddha's not complaining. You will find some external things that happened, but they're not the main cause. This is so hard to hear. The main cause, precious, sweet Robina, is your own anger, darling. And why are you angry? Because you were angry before. Then why was I angry yesterday? Well, it's because I was angry the day before. And why was I angry the day before? And you'll keep answering it until the cows come home, and you'll never find any other reason, because it's a habit. And we slowly own that. It's like a revelation. Wow, now I know the solution to change my anger. It takes a long time to get there. We fight and kick and scream and yell, you know. Not easy. When we can, it is a revelation. Are we communicating here, folks? I think before we go further, you need to ask me some more questions. About this very precise point. And it's the same with happiness.
I have a question, Robina. It's Lorna.
Yes, Lorna.
So with regard to animals, do they just have to live out their karma until it's done, and then they have an opportunity to be reborn possibly as a human?
Right. If you don't, yes. And that's where if we have the compassion wing and you've got your little pussycat and you take this view that little pussycat's programmed with their own delusions and hasn't much chance to practice much virtue, then compassion from our side would be to protect them from killing the mice, to protect them. And so the Buddhist view for sure would be you can't get them to practice virtue. They don't have the capability. But this is where all the practices come in, like the practice of hearing teachings, the practice of the Buddhas, the practice of mantra, which is another whole discussion. The way they say that is anything we hear even can leave an imprint in the mind. So to have your pussycat hearing mantras throughout the day, and the mantras are connected to Buddhas, then that can put an imprint in your little pussycat's mind. And especially at the time of her death, this can be a trigger for a virtuous karmic seed to be triggered before she dies, which will cause her to get a human birth. So there's lots of things we can do to help animals. Do you understand? But the animal can't do much. It's exactly right.
Right. So let's say a seeing eye dog is trained to.
Yeah, then they're doing that's
so that's good karma stuff.
That's wonderful. Anything anyone can do to help another, even if there's not much volition there, it can certainly help. There's all kinds of practices we can do. Most animals we can't get to do that. But then that's where these other practices which we need to think about, like blessing their mind with mantra, because everything we hear leaves an imprint in the mind. It leaves a tendency there. So it's hearing the word Buddha, hearing mantras leaves an imprint in the little pussycat's mind, which can trigger some virtuous karmic seed, and the next life they'll meet the Buddha and have teachings, or whatever you like. You understand what I'm saying? There's many ways we can help, and humans as well. Our old grandma who's senile, babies, the rat, the insect, the ant, blow a mantra on the little ant before it dies, you know. Many things we can do to help them put some virtuous imprints in their mind. Yes. Exactly.
Great, thank you.
Good, Lorna. Thank you so much.
Robina?
Yes.
Yeah, so is depression a habit also, and due to attachment, due to sadness?
Good, darling. Let's talk about this. It's a really important topic. Let's talk about it, okay? Okay, this is roughly the Buddhist analysis, right? So first we've got this sense of a separate self, which is the primordial delusion that runs all of us. Join the universe. If you're in samsara, you've got this. When you're out of samsara, you've cut it and you've realized emptiness and you've quit the sense of an I. This is pretty primordial. All beings have this, and it's very subtle, very primordial. And it's a profound feeling of fear, separate, concrete, solid. It's like a sleeping lion most of the time. And it only arises when we're really insulted or offended. And this sense of I rises so painfully. That's there all the time. This is the root delusion, they call it. On the basis of this, we then have this attachment. So first of all, attachment. So I'm going to talk about attachment and aversion and their intimate relationship, okay? So they're both the voices of the ego grasping. And attachment's the main one first. Is ego grasping gives rise to attachment, which gives rise to anger. And depression's coming in there, and I'll describe. Okay, so attachment's like effectively in our daily life. Attachment is just like default mode. It's like at the level of assumption. It's very subtle. It manifests in gross ways like, oh, I'm attached to cake, I'm attached to music, I'm attached to getting what I want. You understand, we all know that level. But this is a subtler level. It's just there, and it's at the level of assumption. And basically, it's,
like assumption that a person should be honest and treat you
well. No. I'm just beginning to describe the delusions. Sasha, you there, sweetheart?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So just listen, and I'm trying to get to where you're. So no, I didn't say that at all. So these words, I'm trying to use my words very precisely. So try and hear. I know you're doing that. Try and hear the words I'm saying. Okay, I'm trying to describe the problem. I'm getting to depression, Sasha. It's got background. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, darling. So so this ego grasping is the root delusion. There's a sense of a panic-stricken, separate, miserable me. It then gives rise to this massive attachment, and basically that's multifaceted. The deepest level of it, most primordial, born with it, is a feeling of dissatisfaction, an aching feeling that I'm never enough. No matter what I get, never enough. What I do, never enough. What I achieve, never enough. How much Wes tells me he loves me, never enough. It's a default assumption that I'm somehow never enough. This is the energy of attachment. So naturally, because we feel we're not enough, there's an aching emotional hunger there, which is the next level of attachment that then hankers after something. Or maybe there's something out there that if I get it, it'll stop the pain. So that goes to all the objects of the senses. We hunger after them, the food. We hunger after the people. We hunger after the music, or whatever it is out there, convinced we'll find a delicious object such that when we have contact with it, it will bring satisfaction. It will take the pain away. That's the grosser, evident level of attachment. It's happening every millisecond in our mind. So now, every second, attachment doesn't get, basically another raw, painful way to say what attachment is this frantic junkie-inness, and it sounds brutal, it's a junkie-inness that is desperate to only get the nice things. And this is now getting to depression, Sasha. Every millisecond, it's desperate for only the nice things. And another way to say that is that it's desperate to get what I want every second. So now, a million times a day, it simply won't get what it wants, this attachment. We're going to meet the unhappy sound. We're going to have the person who says the wrong words. We're going to have something go wrong at work. We're going to meet the red lights. We're going to have difficult traffic. We're going to have wrong food. There's 1,000 things a day that happen that attachment doesn't want. So what arises that second that attachment doesn't get what it wants, that doesn't get what I want, that's the arising of the third of these three poisons, which is called bare bones. It's called aversion. Now, Sasha, we're getting to your point. Aversion, there's attachment and aversion. Attachment, broadly speaking, when there's something out there that we like, we run towards it. Attachment goes, oh, that's nice, and we run towards it and get all excited. The millisecond there's something there, an event, a thing, whatever, and it's very subtle, that we don't want, aversion arises. We go, oh, God, no, and we move away. So now, aversion is multifaceted. There are people like me, some of us, who when they don't get what they want, when their attachment doesn't get what they want, they have the classic volatile level of aversion, which is called anger, shout and yell. Now, but that's the grosser level of aversion. So then many of us might not do that, but throughout the day, you're going to have mild levels of aversion, which is when you don't get what you want, and you call it getting annoyed, getting upset, getting frustrated. You call it stress. You call it worry. They are all thwarted attachment. They're all the response when our attachment doesn't get what it wants. And then now, Sasha, that stuff builds up because we never pay attention to it. And then one day you're inert in bed because you can't move because you're profoundly depressed. So depression is the internalized buildup of aversion. And that's the answer. That's the simple analysis. Can you hear it all, what I'm saying, or what?
Oh, yes. Wow. It's very helpful.
So this is the key point, Sasha. Go on, ask your question. Say something.
Well, no, you wanted to say something. Go ahead. I'll ask after.
Yeah. This is the point for all of us, you see, because you see, our trouble in our culture, in our psychology, and our own tendency, because we're so obsessed with the external, because we're so obsessed with the outside world, and because we're so obsessed with believing the outside events are the problem, we pay all our attention to that, which means we don't pay attention to what is going on in our mind until you either are inert because you can't get out of bed with depression, or because you want to kill somebody. In other words, we don't notice what's going on in our mind until it affects our body, until it becomes emotional. And that's the tip of the iceberg. That's Vesuvius exploding. That's 120 miles an hour on the freeway, and you suddenly notice your wheels are falling off. The fact is they've been wobbling for a long time, but we've never paid attention. And it's only when we're going crazy, we then think it's time for the pill. We then think it's time for the therapist, because we leave it until it's way too late. This is our major problem. So we would do, and we've been brought up with Buddha's approach, the very simple psychological approach of becoming familiar with, first controlling your body and speech, then becoming familiar with your mind and recognizing all these tendencies in there before they become emotional, you could guarantee we'd be civilized, self-respectful, unneurotic people by now. And that is not sarcastic, because we leave it until it's too late to notice what's going on. That's the problem, Sasha.
Okay, my other question is that I have just learned that an American Tibetan Buddhist teacher who invited me to his group a few years ago was in prison in Nepal for 3 years for attempting to smuggle about $650,000 out of Nepal. And I felt very disturbed by this, and a lot of aversion, and I feel like running because now I can't trust him. And
what's the question?
So I'm wondering, should I ask him about this, or should I just leave the group? And I'm not sure that I can trust what he'll say if I do ask him.
First of all, you have to analyze the action he did. What's wrong with taking $650,000 from somewhere? What's wrong with that? Is that immoral?
Allowed to take currency like that out of the
country? No, forget the country. Forget a country's laws. Let's just look at natural morality first of all. Let's look at. I'm just asking. You have to analyze an action. You know, natural morality. If it's $650,000, it was gifts and he earned it and he wants to use it to develop his center and help sentient beings, well, how can you say that's negative? I'm just asking you this question. I'm not saying that's his motivation.
That's why I'm wondering if I should ask him.
But no, that's not your business. That's not your business. I'm asking you to think about this.
Well,
so wait, there's a whole bunch of things here. Because if you're just talking about an ordinary person, then it's up to you to decide if you want to judge that person. Otherwise, it's not your business. It's not your business.
No.
But Sasha, but if this person is your spiritual teacher, have you chosen this person as your spiritual teacher? Have you consciously thought about it, checked up on him, done your due diligence, and made a conscious decision that this man is your spiritual teacher?
No.
I'm not saying you should have, but I'm asking you, have you done that?
No, I just did it now. I just agreed to go to his group. I didn't.
Okay, so wait a minute. So you haven't chosen him as your guru yet?
No.
Okay, good, fine, darling. So then you don't know his reason for having that money. Do you know? Can you imagine why he has the money?
Well, he told the police that it was money he had to buy a carpet. It was his money that he took into Nepal and was taking it out. But
sorry, stop again. Stop. Would you stop for a second? Well, how much money did you say it was?
$650,000.
Okay, so and that shocks you, doesn't it?
Well, I don't believe that was to buy a carpet, and he implied.
You mean a $250,000 carpet? What do you mean?
Yeah, like more than $500,000. He said it was to buy a carpet, but he didn't buy the carpet.
Okay, so just a minute. So what we're looking at is you here, not him. You've got to look at your mind. You've got to decide. You've got to look at what you're thinking and what you're feeling. Just because, I mean, he might have said that because that's the way the law is, and he's trying to, and they didn't trust him, so they chuck him in prison. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person. It doesn't even mean he was immoral. He might have the purest motivation possible. He might have wanted to build a monastery. You just don't know, do you? So this is where you either have to decide you want to check up on these facts, or you just decide you want to trust him because you've looked at his work, you've looked at what he does, you've checked his center, you've checked his students. But that's up to you, Sasha. That's
he doesn't have a center. He doesn't have a center. He doesn't have a center. He's just a teacher, on his own.
You just said he had a group. That's called a center, a group.
Well, we just meet at different people's houses,
Right. Well, let's start. See, all of this is about you, isn't it? So what do you think you need to do?
Well, I need to either ask him, was this money that he was it from?
Why should you want to ask him? What's wrong with money? What's wrong with having $250,000?
Well, he broke the law and went to prison for 3 years.
That doesn't mean he's a bad person. That's because of stupid Nepalese rules, believe me.
Well, I guess it reminds me.
They wouldn't pay bakshish. So you've got to analyze your facts, Sasha. This is how we all should be. You've got to really look at the facts, and because we believe whatever we're told. So you're assuming because he had a lot of money, he must be wrong. Now you're assuming because he was in prison, he also must be wrong. But I'm questioning those assumptions. Yeah. Not because I'm right or wrong, because we all should do this. You don't know his motivation. You don't know his mind. I can't see anything wrong with having $650,000. And the Nepalese government, being totally corrupt, probably want a percentage of it. And they probably put him in prison because he didn't pay bakshish.
Yeah,
so you have to look at the whole thing, Sasha.
Yeah, well, that's why I wonder if I should talk to him, because it could have been.
Sasha, don't ask me that question, darling. You're a big girl. I'm not trying to be rude to you, but this is so important to be clear. You've got to analyze all the facts and you have to decide. So, I mean, also, darling, the point is, it's like, again, you've got to question what is wrong with money. You've got to question, of course, because someone's sent to prison doesn't mean they're bad. You've got to look at your own assumptions is the first thing I'm suggesting. Can you see my point, sweetheart?
Well, it brings to a question of character, and we're supposed to look for 12 years before we take a teacher. And in the past, I was very let down and disillusioned by another teacher that I had.
Well, I'd suggest that, forget the teachers, but I would suggest, and I mean, you're the one who's asking me these questions, darling girl, and I'm using you as a guinea pig here. I'm so sorry. But what we're talking about here is our naivety, our attachment, our expectations, our projections onto other people. This is why we get into trouble with boyfriends. Forget about spiritual teachers. So again, the whole discussion here, Sasha, is not about the external person. Is it about our mind?
I know.
And darling, this is your job then. Look into your attachment, look into your assumptions, look into your expectations, look into your naive, we've got to learn about our mind, Sasha. Then you'll have intelligence and know how to decide whether a person is valid. That's the work we all have to do, honey. It's a good question you're asking, but can you hear my point?
Well, I hear your point that I have to look into my mind, but
but then, darling, you look into your mind, then you're going to find the truth. Because your mind is what's saying things. Your mind is what's describing this person. Your mind is describing the past teacher. So you've got to look into where your faults are in your own mind.
Yes. Well, I've seen that I've been naive and innocent. Good.
That's attachment. That's called attachment, darling. We have to learn about it, honey. These words are, see, darling Sasha, this is such a good question you're asking because we're all the same. But this is the point. We can't. Everything we do, every choice we make, everything we do with our body, everything we do with our speech is driven by what's in our mind. So if you've suffered in the past, as you just said, you've got to look at the fault in your mind. There might also be fault out there, but that you can't be certain until we at least sort out in the mind the facts from the fictions. And to look steadily at that, You've got a good heart, it's really clear. But like all of us, we have attachment, we're naive, we get let down because we're naive. And that's naivety is attachment. All our expectations, all our kind of good heart mix of attachment. It's a minefield, sweetheart. But this is your main job. This is your main job. So whether it's this teacher or anybody you see in the street or anybody next door, anybody at work, we don't know where they're coming from. We can't judge by their actions because we are naive and we don't have wisdom. So the first job is to work on our mind. The first job is to work on our mind. When we sort out what attachment is and what aversion is and our fears and our dramas, then we can begin to have common sense and see things more clearly. Are you with me, sweetheart? This is really what practice is,
Well, I still don't know whether I should confront him with this and ask him about it or not.
Well, you haven't heard a word. Well, sweetheart, you haven't heard a word I said. I'm so sorry to be so blunt, precious girl. You haven't heard a word I said.
You're saying I have to look at my mind.
Yes, darling Sasha, yes. That's it. Stop right there. Stop there. And until you're certain, leave the people alone. Until you are sorting yourself out and seeing your problem and seeing your attachment and your fears. I mean, I hear you well. So before you're ready to start jumping on, because, if you don't trust the man and he tells you something, you don't already trust him, then why should you think you're going to trust him? Because you don't have the basis in your own mind to trust him. You've got to sort your own mind out first. So maybe back off from spiritual teachers from now until you're more certain in yourself and you're got a basis for making wise decisions, precious girl. For your own sake. Can you hear me at all, darling, or not? It's a very powerful point you're talking about.
Yeah, I hear you.
Good, darling. One step at a time, honey. Thank you, Sasha. So important. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
I have a quick question. It's Andrea. How are you?
Hello there. Yes, Andrea. Talk to me.
My house was broken in on Thursday night and my garage was left open. People took a lot of stuff. And then 12 hours later, somebody stole 2 packages with 2 new phones in front of my house.
Oh my God, all coming. My goodness. Are you dealing with it? Are you okay?
I am okay. And I'm just saying, is this my karma ripening and I'm just getting rid of some stuff? was I really bad in the past? And I'm trying to be compassionate that these people really need this money, that I don't really need the excess. But I can't stop thinking in my head. I was like, they could have left one and could have split with me, you know, one bike, two for you, one for me. You know what I mean? So you know, you talk about depression. I couldn't get up in the morning the next day because I felt like I had to come to terms in my mind, like you're saying, how do I want to process this? I don't want these people in jail. I don't want them to get in trouble, you know, but it was a present from my husband. So it's just, I think I'm in a good space, but I would love to hear how do you recommend I handle it? Because I'm in LA and most likely there will be more given 30 million people are out of job. So how do we stay focused in our mind and just continue to have compassion, you know, and not...
Compassion is university, baby. We've got to go to high school and junior school first. So forget compassion right now. Don't leap into compassion. Don't worry about compassion. Like I'm trying to get to Sasha, we've got to do the high school and junior school first and look into our own mind and understand karma. That's the nuts and bolts of that helps you process how to see it. In other words, you're trying to ask the question, why did this happen to me? That's what your real question is. Why did this happen? And you're shocked. You're shocked that it happened to you, right? Isn't it? You're shocked.
Not even. I'm okay. I know it happened. Very easy.
No,
yeah, I'm just sad. I'm more sad.
But you wouldn't be asking the question if you already had an answer. So it's
Sure,
puzzling.
sure.
Trying to find a way to see it. If only they'd left half. Blah 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 blah. All these thoughts.
Right.
You know? So it's up to you. All I can do is give you the Buddhist explanations because this is my job here. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a communist. I can give you the Buddhist view. And a person who is trying to be a Buddhist would try to use this as the basis for interpreting. That's all I'm saying to Sasha. My answers to Sasha were based upon the Buddhist analysis of things, you know?
Right.
So the very first level of practice is understanding karma.
Okay.
So as I said before, every millisecond, whatever we experience, every moment, whether it's called suffering or happiness, is necessarily the fruit of past actions of our own. So all the other days in your life, you see, this is what's fascinating, isn't it? You don't get stolen from every day, do you?
No.
And your husband gives you things?
Yeah.
And people give you things?
Yeah.
And then, okay, but you never ask the question, why did people give me things? We only ask the question, why do people take things? And this is what's interesting, isn't it? But because we take it for granted that we should get nice things, but we just get shocked because we think we deserve good things, but we're shocked when bad things happen. So what this is telling us at a deeper level is aversion or anger is how dare that happen to me? And when attachment gets what it wants, when all the days in your life when you haven't been stolen from, when you can probably count hundreds of events of people giving you things. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And you've never asked the question, why did good things happen to me? And we don't. That's the interesting point, Andrea. And that's a function of attachment. It's this very deep kind of this assumption in us that somehow we just deserve good things, so we take them for granted. So we never bother to think, why do good things happen to me? Well, every time you've received something, that's the fruit of your past generosity. That's the fruit of your lack of miserliness. So it's like a miracle. So now someone's come along and stolen from you, and we're mortally offended and upset and confused and fearful. That's because it's the fruit of your stealing in the past. So when you know that the getting things is a fruit of your non-stealing, then you know why when something happens, and it's only once in how many years. So aren't you fortunate? Andrea, wow.
Yes, absolutely.
No, but darling, you asked me the answer. This is the answer. So start practicing delighting every single day you get something. Every time your husband gives you even something. Every time you go to a shop and people give you something. Don't just take it for granted. This is the implication of this level of practice. And then when the bad one happens, you just go, oh, well, that's great. I'm just purified a bit of karma. Aren't I lucky? And that's the end of that, and you move forward.
Move forward. Mm-hmm.
That's the attitude using karma. But of course, I'm saying it in an easy way, but this is not the philosophy we have. We don't think about this. And so we've got to think about it every day. And this is what then this is what informs the way we respond to things, the way we see things. Do you understand, darling?
Yeah, I think I have it. I understand it, but I think the feeling is still fighting you. But, you know, there's a part of you that is like, but it's not fair. And then I'm like, well, but, you know, exactly what you said. So I'm in between going back and forth, but thank you.
Of course, but again, remember, the powerful method is what I said before. Please just stop taking for granted all the time you receive something. We never think of why do good things happen. It's quite shocking to think this. But, you know, every time someone's kind to you, this is the point, Andrea, that I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And in a way, Sasha, this is also the point for you, it's all of us. When good things happen, that's our attachment getting what it wants. And there's a feeling of, well, I deserve it. And then when something bad happens, like Sasha's now got this person, she's shocked, this teacher, he could be wrong. She's shocked this bad thing has happened. But when good things happen, we take it for granted and just assume we deserve it. And more good should happen, please, give me more. But as soon as a bad one happens, we have a panic attack and we wonder, because we have this assumption that we only deserve the good and we have an assumption we don't deserve the bad. Now, the point I'm getting at, the deeper point here about karma, if we had the view in our mind, if we'd really practice, and we can try to do this, the view of karma as being the natural law that runs the universe, it would be like you have the attitude towards your garden. If you've got a garden and you are a good gardener, and every day you walk out in that garden, you know it's your garden, you never forget. And every time you see the veggies and the herbs, you are really happy. You never take them for granted because you know it's the fruit of your past work, don't you? You understand that? And you'd rejoice in your hard work because there's the result. And every time you see the weeds, you don't say, who put weeds in my garden? I don't deserve weeds. You'd never say that. Why not?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking
Why
you,
not?
why would you never say that?
I don't know. You accept it?
No, why would you rejoice in the vegetables when you see them?
Well, because you worked hard and you
Thank
deserve
you.
it.
Why would you not say who put weeds in my garden?
Because you didn't plant them.
Who?
You think you didn't plant them.
No. Why would you say, how dare I get weeds? I don't deserve them. Why would you never say that?
I don't know.
Because the assumption in life is that good things should happen to us. We do not think we did anything to deserve it. They just should happen. And we get outraged when bad things happen because we think we don't deserve. So in other words, in the view we live our lives, there's no sense that we have any sense of responsibility. We're like these victims that didn't ask to get born, and you better give me good things and you better not give me bad things. It's a child's view. Whereas your garden, you know it's your garden. So the fruits and the veggies there are the fruit of your hard work, and the weeds are there. They're also your weeds, and you didn't pull them out, and you won't beat yourself up. You'll go, I better pull them out now. You would own the weeds and you would own the flowers. Do you see? Can you hear what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's the point about life. Your life is your garden. Your life is your garden, and everything that happens, you caused it. This really does take time, Andrea. It's not just simple words.
Absolutely. No, I know, because I think in our Western mind, the hardest part is that when, like you're saying, it's like, oh, I didn't pull the weed. But like, I think we don't understand because we don't know what we did before. I think we try to overanalyze and say, oh, if they stole this, what did I do to deserve this? And I think it's about trusting.
No, that's perfectly you do that. If you learn botany, you have to learn to know why things are in your garden. So it's exactly the same here. It's not overanalyzing, it's being very intelligent. You just don't turn it against yourself, that's all. You've got to learn botany. So here we're learning Buddha's botany. So you know immediately if people give you things, it's a fruit of your generosity. You'll never forget it. You'll never take it for granted, ever. Like you never take your veggies for granted. So it's the fruit of your hard work that people are kind to you and loving, and you have a house and a home and husband and children and friends. We take it for granted. That's the hubris of attachment. We're very arrogant. We take it for granted, like as if someone else put them there. No, it's the fruit of your hard work. Be much more humble with the view of karma. And then when the bad things happen, you own them immediately and you vow never to steal again. So that's how you learn from your experience. So you learn from your experience when people are kind to you, realizing it's the fruit of your past virtue. So you keep deciding to be more virtuous and more kind. And you learn when the bad things happen, but you'll stop doing those. But whereas, and this is a very profound view, but we don't practice it like this. But this is the way to try and practice it every day. If we take
okay, I think I will try.
Good, darling. But you have to study it and learn it every day if you want to. It's up to you, you know. But that's
I want. That's why I'm here. Thank you, my love.
So in that notes you got in the course notes, all these teachings are in there. If you want to read them, all the things I've been saying to you are in the course notes. All right. Thank you so much. Andrew, anyone else there?
Can I ask a question?
Who is speaking to me? Dana.
Dana?
Yes, Dana. Talk to me, sweetheart.
With things being dynamic and there being no true separate self, can the consciousness or karma associated with, say, two physical bodies in one lifetime be combined and reborn in one body in the future, or a mind associated with one physical body split off and be reborn in two bodies in the future?
All of us ordinary, as long as we're ordinary beings and we're caught up in negative karma, we're caught up in attachment and caught up in anger, that can never happen, not possible. One mind is one mind and you'll get one body. And there can't be, the only way there'll be two minds in what we think of as one body is if you're Siamese twins, what we call, conjoined. When there's two consciousnesses there sharing a body, or even like virtually sharing some parts of the body, that's from very strong attachment in the past, where you actually end up sharing similar organs. There's just two people there. You understand? Yeah.
Yes.
But just a moment. I'm not finished.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just continuing. So normal people, we have one mind, one body, and we just keep going, okay? But as you progress and become a bodhisattva and you realize emptiness and you get all the high realizations, you have the power to manifest your mind in many bodies at the same time. That's a whole discussion. That's another discussion altogether.
That's what I wanted to know.
You're aware and you're capable and you can do that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Any more questions?
Hello, Venerable Robina. I actually have two questions. So
Talk to me.
So my first question is about when you talk about having like a deep meditation practice in order to understand our past karma. If we have,
what did you say? Start again, darling.
When you mentioned talking about having a deep meditation practice through which you understand like where your karma came from.
Well, that's, you're very advanced when you can actually see it in the past, when you have clairvoyance. The first step is to learn, the first step is to learn the theories of this action comes from that result, like we just talked before, But to actually see it in the past, you need to have achieved what they call single-pointed concentration, where you now have clairvoyance. That's advanced.
Yeah.
But learn the theories first about what causes what. That's right. Do you understand?
Yeah, I understand. And the rest of that is, I'll keep that in mind. And the rest of my question was, before we have that understanding, can we use, is it like healthy, like in terms of like, our Buddhist practice to use karma as a tool of acceptance and accountability? For example, if someone does something like bad to me, instead of thinking, oh, poor me, I could be like, oh, perhaps I did that to someone in the past or in a past life, but without like knowing for sure, but more like using it as a tool to, kind of rise above that self-pity.
That's the point. That's the whole point of it. That's what it brings. In other words, like the same analogy of the garden. If you've got these fruits and vegetables out in your garden, but let's just say you have never heard of botany. Think of this for a second. Let's say you've never heard of any law called botany. And you have no idea why there are fruits and veggies and weeds in the garden, right? You have no idea why they're there. And you'd be always shocked if big weeds start coming. Why is that happening in my garden? I don't deserve it. That's how we think about our life now. We really believe there's no cause for why things happen. We believe we deserve the good things and we grasp them greedily, and we get upset and angry when the bad things happen because we don't understand Buddha's botany. So of course that's the point about karma. It's an explanation from the Buddha's point of view of why things happen. So when we really do begin to use that as our working hypothesis, you learn it and understand it. That's exactly what you apply. Just like when you go learn botany, you apply that to your garden. You know why there are roses and why there are herbs and why there are weeds, and you know what to do with that garden now, don't you? That's exactly the point, sweetheart. That's the whole point of learning about karma. Of course, absolutely. That's the point. Exactly. Because when you learn to abide by the laws of karma and use it to explain your life to you, a profound change happens. You stop self-pity. It helps you give up attachment. It helps you give up anger. You become much more conscious, much more grown up, much more mature. That's the point. Because you know why things happen. And then when bad things happen to us, we even are able to have compassion. So this is the point. I always tell this story. Because for Tibetans, right? Buddhism's been there for like 1,300 years. Easily, and it's completely the view of their universe. In the same way that for us in our world, the materialist view is the most natural thing in the world. Isn't it? Everybody believes their mother made them. Everybody believes their mind is their brain. Everybody knows there's no reason why bad things happen. We don't know why. That's just the view in our universe, isn't it? In the modern world. Would you agree with that? It's just the way we think. They have got the view of karma for 1,300 years. 99% of Tibetans, 99.9% were Buddhist. It was in the bones of their being. It was completely something they grew up with. It's the natural view of the universe. And it's been in India for thousands of years. Do you understand my point? So the view of karma is their view of why the universe is. It's completely natural to them. So there's always just tell this story about when I was in New York in 2003, when I was based in the States, and I was running the prison project. And that was in California. And then Richard Gere in New York invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama to come and teach. And he also decided we'd kind of collaborate and work a bit on bringing a bunch of ex-prisoners. So he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison, and to have a conversation, to meet each other and talk. And he invited a couple of people like me as well, who'd worked with people in prison. And then they met His Holiness. It was a wonderful meeting, okay? Very moving, all experience of their dramas and their sufferings in their prisons, in their prison life. Do you understand? So they met His Holiness. So he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns who'd been abused, sexually abused and tortured in prison, right? So they were telling their story. So I think this is the point now I want to go a bit deeper on this one. Because for them, karma is the natural view of the world that they're used to since they're born and all their country. It's like the default view. Do you understand? It's not surprising to them.
Yeah.
And they know it intimately. And that means they're applying it every single day in the way you said. So of course it's got a profound effect on the way they experience their experiences. So I can think that if all those Americans listening to these young women, I would have imagined that you probably, if they wanted to quantify suffering, these young women's was the worst. Sexual abuse and torture, just for being a little Buddhist nun. Do you understand? They definitely were innocent. Do you understand? But they could see very clearly these nuns weren't tortured, weren't mentally tortured, weren't anguished, weren't raving on, why did this happen to us? We don't deserve it, which is the way we respond, isn't it? Do you understand my point?
Yeah.
They didn't suffer like this at all. And also they weren't angry. This is very shocking. If we really analyze anger, anger is this outrage when bad things happen because we think we don't deserve it. And that's because of attachment, which is this hungry part of us that assumes we only deserve the good. That's what I'm saying before. They're very deep assumptions. Attachment to thinks I deserve the good, and anger thinks I don't deserve the bad. And we all live according to this. Are you understanding me?
Yeah.
There's no view of why things happen. So no wonder we suffer. No wonder things are shocking to us. No wonder we get upset when bad things happen. But we take for granted all the good. It's really outrageous. So these young women, they didn't have anger. This is very hard for us to accept because we think it's a natural, normal, healthy response when you're abused and tortured, for God's sake. But and why didn't they have anger? Listen to anger. What does anger say? How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's the voice of anger. And we all have it if we assume we assume that our mother made us. We assume we began in our mother's womb. We don't assume a past life. We don't assume a law of karma. So of course we're going to get angry. It's the philosophical viewpoint of our lives. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I understand.
These young women, I was there, and they were sad, and there was tears. And one of them then said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we knew we must have harmed them in the past, and because we know that they will suffer terribly in the future. That's the basis of compassion. So not only with karma do you grow up more and become accountable and stop self-pity, and it takes time, years of practice to get to that. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by believing in karma. You've got to learn it and understand it and apply it every day. You know, it's powerful, interpreting your life, why this, and all of the good things too, which is what I was saying before. We've got to appreciate the good things, but we just take those for granted. So that will bring the result of more accountability, less up and down, less attachment, less anger, more brave, more grown up, less guilty, less self-pity. There's no question. And it is the basis of compassion because we realize we are all in the same boat and everybody gets harmed because they have harmed, and people harm because they've been harmed and will continue to receive harm. So it's the basis of compassion for every sentient being. So it's profound, this view of karma, not just some kind of weird punishment reward model. It takes time to internalize it, I tell you. Do you understand?
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. That was a really profound explanation.
Good, Robin.
And I have one more question,
yes,
if that's okay.
Yes.
So if like being in a place that's environmentally polluted is like the result of like karma for killing, then
yes, that's right.
What is the result? What karma comes with like the environmental pollution that we are causing?
Well, see, that's a whole different kettle of fish. That's I mean, what would you call that? You'd say if we just because of our attachment, we misuse this planet, we misuse this, and we harm the planet. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? By polluting things, we're harming it. Well, that's just ignorance, and it's out of ignorance not realizing there'll be any results. And it just probably karmically, you have to look at, so to understand what karma you're doing, you have to look at the mind, the thought, at the intention and the motivation and the action you're doing. So the action is mainly out of attachment and laziness, or out of greed, that we misuse this and do that and do this. That would just end up being some similar result for ourselves, where we would not be where maybe we wouldn't get what we wanted, or we wouldn't get what we needed. But it's not to do with, something to do with killing. And killing, the environmental result of past killing is that you have pollution now. The environmental result of sexual misconduct is where everything's very filthy and dirty. The environmental result of, for example, abusive language is you'll be nothing can grow. They've all got their own results. So to know what karma we're creating now, you have to look into your mind, the intention, the motivation, and then the thing you're doing. And we haven't gone into that yet. So then I think some similar result to that. You're not, but if you're killing, that's a different discussion. That's another whole discussion. You're not killing, it's just harming, it's just being selfish. You're not harming sentient beings. You're just harming the physical world, which in turn impacts upon sentient beings for sure. But there's no intention to kill, there's no intention to lie, there's no intention to steal. So it's just like selfishness and attachment, I'd say. That's like, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it depends
on what's in your mind and the action you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's the karma you're creating. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you so much.
These are very helpful questions. Thank you, everybody.
General Robina, I have a question.
Yes, Greg. Talk to me.
So, what really resonated with me in what you were saying is about how we make the body the boss, and how loud the senses can be. Like me, for example, I have a big attachment to the opposite sex. And the way that it plays out is, like you said, my eye consciousness makes contact with the object. Then I experience a pleasant feeling, which, as I understand it, is the maturation of karma. And what happens from there is I go from the pleasant feeling instantly to craving. I can't even hear the exaggerated thoughts of attachment.
Exactly, that's right. Well, that's what it is. Attachment is a craving. So attachment, first it's the contact with the object, and then because of the habit, the nice feeling comes, and then instantly the exaggerated story. That's attachment, and then the craving, the wanting to get the object. The first is the exaggeration of the story, how divine, how beautiful, and then the wanting of it. That's what samsara is. Join the universe, honey. You just how we all do it, and it's habits. So the major practice, a most direct, powerful practice, whether you're attached to pretty shapes, or whether you're attached to video games, or whether you're attached to pornography on the computer, whether attached to food, whatever the object is that we think about and yearn for and exaggerate and distort, the powerful analysis to do is to try and realize, to try and not believe in the story. To feel because one of the sufferings of attachment is the panic of not getting the object. When the attachment is very strong, I mean, forget girls, forget video games, but just look at food. All of us have attachment to food. You think of the cake, and it's really hard not to keep putting it in the mouth, because the pain of it, attachment is multifaceted. It's hunger, emotional hunger, and then it's got karmic imprint of the object, for you a girl, let's say, or whatever, and then there's the exaggeration of it, and then the frantic hunger to get contact with the object, believing that happiness will come. That's whether it's cake, video games, or indeed even killing. It's you're attached to it. So this is one of the most powerful practices. Start again. The first level of practice. Okay, if you run around jumping and raping on girls, you've got to stop that, okay? If you run around putting every piece of cake in your mouth, you've got to stop that. You've got to control your body and speech first. So if that's not your problem, if it's mainly your mind, then the next level of practice is to analyze and try and deconstruct this whole analysis. And even though everything in you believes that object is divine, because it's the habit, you learn to recognize it's just your mind making up that story. Now, have you ever had girlfriends?
Yes.
Have you ever had girlfriends who left you?
Yeah.
And so you got angry with them, you got hurt by them, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
So when you thought of that when you were in love with that girl, you couldn't resist her and thought she was divine. But I bet the same girl, when she left you, you don't have any nice feelings about her.
No, not at first.
Yeah, proof. This is the proof. This is enough to make you realize emptiness. That proves there's nothing in that shape that is divine in its nature. So if you're getting all excited, she'll look divine. But if she's mean to you, the same body, the same breasts, the same hair, and she suddenly looks ugly. So it proves There's nothing out there. It proves it. So use that analysis every time.
Yes, you're so right, Venerable Robina.
Good. So keep practicing.
Something else that's really been helping me is I was reading Lama Zopa's Rinpoche's book about how to practice Dharma, and he says, look at your mind when you get the object of desire. Is it peaceful? It's agitated. And we call that agitation happiness, but it's really just another form of suffering. And that really hit me. It's so true.
Well, that's the point. That's hard to see because it's the only happiness we know, you know. That's our problem. It's the best we can get. Good. Thank you, honey.
I had a quick question.
Good, Kathy.
You had said that it was good every day to have purification of the mind.
A body, speech, and mind. I'll go into it. It's a practice you do.
So that's all of the practices. I was wondering what a specific practice was at the end of the day to purify.
This is a good idea, Kathy. Let's talk about the purification practice. Absolutely. Good idea. We've got 30 minutes to go, so we can do that. But were there any more urgent questions before we do the purification practice today? We'll discuss it. Will that do? Carol, you're moving your mouth, or she's not talking to me. You talking to me, Carol? Turn your mute off, Carol. I see you talking. Can you turn Carol's mute off, Andrew? Andrew, you gone? Andrew's gone. I can't turn you off. Did you want to nod to me, Carol? Did you want to talk to me?
Yeah.
Okay, now you're there. Well done. Talk to me.
Okay, great. I want to go back to something you said this morning. My partner of many years passed away about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, darling.
From 6 years of cancer. It was a peaceful, blissful, he passed in his sleep. But being the scientist he was, he willed his body to UCI Medical Center. And within about 12 hours after he passed, they came and took his body. And so my question is, if it's, it's a couple of days before all of the consciousness entity being leaves, what happens if they start removing organs in the body before all of the consciousness has left?
I understand. So did he offer his body in order for them to take the organs and for transplant, or just for study?
For study.
Do you know when they would start working on his body, do you think?
Well, the blessing may be because they fortunately, now I'm thinking of that, had so many bodies, they almost didn't come to take him. So I lovingly would like to think that it was at least 3 or 4 days, or maybe.
Okay. Okay, in general, it's a good point. Thank you, Kathy. So the thing is, in general, it is said that once you stop breathing, it can be from that point up to 3 days before what they call the subtle consciousness will leave the body. So it doesn't follow that it's that. Were you with him?
I wasn't with him when he passed, but I was there within about 2 or 3 hours after.
Okay.
And
So
then
did you check anything or do any? Did you know anything about checking to see if his mind was still there? You don't know about
that. His background is Irish, and so is mine, and so I did the Irish tradition of bathing completely. So I stayed with him for about 5 hours, and I bathed him, and I did prayers, and he was
that's
a
wonderful.
very peaceful guy. He meditated.
Wonderful.
And my sense, I felt the day before when I saw him before he passed, that his energy was already going. He was in a very peaceful place.
Yes. Okay.
And I sensed a huge energy shift, and I woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning. I think he was passing right then.
Yes, I understand. Okay, so then the thing is, it can be true that the mind could stay in the body up to 3 days. So the thing is, it all depends on if they disturb the body, but you can't guarantee any of these things. But traditionally, if they disturb the body, I mean, how would they have moved his body? How did they do it? Did you see them do it?
I did. They just lifted him very, very carefully off. He was at home on hospice, so he was in a very good and peaceful environment.
Good.
Not in the hospital, thank God.
Yeah.
And they were very respectful and very careful about all of that.
And so they moved him very gently. Well, if his mind was still there and you'd done prayers and things, that could really have benefited his mind, So if they moved his body and just put it somewhere, it's possible his mind would just stay there and then leave when it's ready. And that's why it's important, normally in our tradition, we would continue to do prayers for those 3 days to help the mind.
That I was going to ask you about that. I think there are some prayers and sort of rituals that one can do with candles.
Yeah.
And prayers.
all kinds of things. You can certainly do some prayers or mantras for his mind. So we just have to assume, because he died peacefully, which means at the time he was stopped breathing, a virtuous karmic seed would have been triggered, which means in the Buddhist view that his peaceful death is an indication he will get another human rebirth. That's what, and if he had a good life of morality and goodness, then it's very likely he did. So you can strike strong prayers that that's possible. That's the best thing.
I also wanted to ask you, you said that like 2 weeks before someone passes, that essence moves on to another.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, okay, the general tradition, the traditional explanation, he died when? 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, April 30th. So.
Okay, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, not more. So that means it's possible his mind left soon after that. And then what happens next is, this is according to the this is the Buddhist tradition, his consciousness would take this kind of like another kind of, it's even a bit similar to the Catholic thing about purgatory. It's in between. So they call it a bardo, or
yes, I'm familiar with
so intermediate. So really the experience of it is just like a dream. It's just, we've got gross consciousness, subtle consciousness, and very subtle consciousness. So gross consciousness is how we are in day-to-day life with this bag of bones, but subtle consciousness is like a dream. So then he would be reborn in this intermediate state, and if the karmic seed that was triggered before he stopped breathing, which is when his new rebirth would have been programmed, it was like to a human mummy, basically he's twiddling his thumbs in this intermediate state, waiting for his new mummy and daddy to hop into bed. So then when they hop into bed, he will run like a magnet and grab into his new mummy and get another human birth. So that could take up to 7 weeks.
Yes. All right. Okay.
So the Buddhists can say mantras and prayers right now if he's in the intermediate state to help him make sure he gets that decent human rebirth, so he can keep on moving on his spiritual.
Thank you so much. That's very loving.
What's his name?
Kenneth.
We'll say at the end of our session, we can do a little prayer for Kenneth. Okay.
Oh, that would be so touching. Thank you.
Thank you, darling. So now let's talk about how we purify karma. Okay. All right, it's like all of this is a psychological process, and actually it's very empowering. I found this, it's very empowering. At the end of the day, you kind of clean up your act, So remember, given that everything we think and do and say sows seeds in our mind, programs our mind. So given that we are taking this view that our consciousness goes back and back and back, taking the view that every second we're sowing seeds, taking the view that no seed goes astray, then it's clear we've got these bank vaults of billions of seeds. So the first level of practice is at least live a good life, live according to vows. We haven't discussed that yet, but we can do that tomorrow. Don't kill, don't harm, don't steal, don't lie. Attempt to be a good person, which is pretty powerful. And then at the end of the day, we then have to, that's like stop sowing more weeds. So now what we've got to do is try and put atomic bombs under the seeds that we have planted in the past before they ripen as weeds, before they ripen as suffering. This is really getting ahead of the game. And as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do this every day. Now, as Lama Yeshe says, we create negativity. First and foremost, it starts with the mind, and the body and the speech carry it out. So, but it's implanted in the mind, it's programmed in the mind, it's sown seeds in the mind. So we create negativity with the mind. Well, guess what? We change the thing by creating positivity with the mind. It's like it counteracts it. Then there's no karma we can't change. It's very logical, psychologically. Don't hear it as some religious practice, So what is it? It's just 4 steps. I think it's I'm sure it's in the book we did. Let's have a look at the book. Unraveling Our Emotions. Look at the chapters. Contents. No, I didn't put the purification practice in there. I just put how karma plays out in our minds. I'm sorry, I didn't put how you purify it. So maybe I can, if you people really wanted this, I can put another PDF, give it to Andrew, and he can send it out to you all, and it'll be in there. And some of you, if you know me from the past, you'll have it already. So there's the first chapter in there is how we create karma. We didn't go into too much detail. And then the second one is how we purify karma. And I'll just go through it now. But if you want a PDF of it, Andrew, I'll give one to him and he can post it for you, send it to you. Okay. Or I'll do another version of this book. So it's the same with more teachings in it. Okay, it's very simple. It's 4 steps, the 4 R's. The first is regret. The second is reliance. The third is the remedy. The fourth is resolve. So we really get it down to nuts and bolts. you'll hear the logic of this psychology. You know, it's very practical. And the first one is incredibly important to understand. If we don't understand this one properly, we make a big mess. And this is one we don't understand properly. So, and because when we hear regret, the attitude we have is called guilt. And this is so important to understand. This is to unpack this in our minds. And this is our tendency very strongly. So I remember His Holiness was asked one time, I always quote this, it's so simple. A person said, what's the difference between this attitude of regret and what we call guilt? Okay. So as His Holiness said, guilt, you look in the past, let's say, and you go, I did that, and I did this, and I did that. I cheated on my boyfriend, I kicked the dog, I killed my mother, I stole, whatever it might be, whatever. A negative action. And we're talking here at the simple level of negative actions of ones that harm another in particular. So that's the first level. And then, of course, what guilt is when we say that, I did this, I did that, I did this, and then automatically, I mean, way beyond articulating it, you know, as a concept, it's automatic. We then go, and therefore I am a bad person. We don't even say those words almost, but that is exactly what guilt is. It's so aching, so painful, so completely total. It's just an assumption. The whole of me, and this is the point, the whole of me is bad. So it's self-loathing, basically. And everybody has it because this is a function of ego grasping and all the delusions. Their key thing is to exaggerate. Now listen to it. Look at, basically it's anger, but you're the object. So listen to anger. You did this, and you did that, and you did this. And what do you conclude? And therefore you're a bad person. Like we just said before with Greg and the ugly girlfriend. First of all, the nice girlfriend, she's totally divine and she's a good person because she's just, because, you know, this is the point about attachment. He likes the girl shape, you know, so then his attachment exaggerates the whole of her as being completely divine. I mean, she might be a creepy person. She might be cheating on him and lying. He doesn't care. Attachment like this sucker. This is something for Sasha. Is Sasha still there? Where's Sasha? Oh, she's gone. There she is. Sasha's there. This is what attachment does, Sasha. Whether it's a spiritual teacher, a piece of cake, or a boyfriend. And it's this, like I said before, it's our emotional hungriness. We're looking for something out there. And it's marvelous, Sasha, that you want a spiritual path. It's marvelous that you want a guru. But what the trouble is with all of us, because we have this attachment, we meet a person, and we'll go, oh, wow, he must be so charismatic. He's wow, he's wonderful. I know you're not saying any of that, Sasha. I'm just talking, darling. Your example was a good one. So we leap in, and then it's like we fall in love with somebody. So Greg and his girlfriend is a classic example. When you're in love, it's the shape that you see, and the lips and the mouth and everything. And then you think of it all the time, and you think, oh, you don't just think, oh, her lips are nice, but her feet are ugly. No, the whole of her is nice. Look at how attachment does that. You're not selective. I adore your left ear, but I can't stand your right ear. No, in the beginning, attachment just thinks everything about her is totally divine. This is, and then it's, the thing is, it's a delicious feeling that is triggered. It triggers very nice, pleasant feelings. So we conflate pleasure with attachment, but they're separate parts of our mind. That's another whole discussion. So then attachment, and then what comes with this is expectation. Then you want contact every minute with her. Because why? Because you're going to get delicious feelings. And you want more of these delicious feelings. And you're completely in love with it and have all these expectations and all this possessiveness and all this manipulating and all this controlling to get her and keep her. This is attachment, whether it's a cake or a person. Now look at the aversion. When she cheats on him, it's the same body, the same lips, the same blonde hair, the same black face, whatever the person he thinks is gorgeous, whatever her shape and color was. Now, how does she appear to his eyes? Oh, the whole of her now is evil. The whole of her is horrible. It is completely hysterically irrational. How can we possibly think that's true? But we get sucked in every time. We believe in our own ridiculous story. Now, that's guilt. I'm a bad person. You did 2.5 things wrong. Even if you did 22.5 things wrong, you paint the whole of you as a monster. That's self-loathing. And we love that attitude. We run like a magnet to it. It is so painful. It's automatic. It's deep in our bones. It's a function of ego grasping. So then what's regret, as His Holiness said? This first step. The first part he said is exactly the same. You look in the past. Well, I did do that. And I did do that. And I did kill the dog. And I did kick my mother. And I did have an abortion. And I did steal $1 million. You accept, and this is hard. It is a truth that you did that. But what's your conclusion now? What can I do to fix it? Guilt is paralysis. Guilt is just swimming. And I'm not trying to be mean to us because we all have it, in total self-pity. It's like it is anger, and we sink into it, we swim in it, and we believe it 1,000,000,000%. We all know that 27 people of your friends can say, no, you're not as bad as that, Robina. Yes, I am, we will say. It's so, but this is the irony, the tragedy of ego grasping, the tragedy of these delusions is we are addicted to these lies, and they are breaking our hearts, you know. So we've got to be so humble with ourselves because they will not go overnight. But we have to do the analysis. So that regret already in this simple practice is a profound practice. Now let's look at some of the mistaken conceptions about regret. The commonest thing we think regret is saying, and this is coming from guilt as well, is I'm bad, I shouldn't have done that. That's exactly the same as anger. When you hit your kid, you shouldn't have done that, we say. This is a meaningless state of mind. It's the same with guilt. I did it and I shouldn't have, we'll say. This is setting it in stone, and it's irrational. We've got to be so cautious with these thoughts, you know. So regret, what can I do about it, is a profound shift. It's humble. It's recognizing that whatever I do sows seeds in my mind and will ripen in the future as my suffering. It's got nothing to do with guilt and blame and I'm going to get punished, which is the way ego thinks. It's a wholesome attitude. It's an urgent, self-respectful attitude, like you've eaten poison. When you eat something, when you've just discovered you got like sugar, you know, you're a diabetic and you've discovered you got sugar in your food. Look at how rigorous we are now with food. You don't go, oh, I ate sugar, I'm such a bad person. And every day you're getting sicker and sicker, I'm such a bad person. You would never say that. Equally, the other response we have is blame. Who put sugar in my food? And you're dying of diabetes and all you want to do is find someone to blame. That's the other kind of anger, and it's absurd. Like you're dying of cancer and you still keep smoking your Marlboros through your throat. And you're trying to sue Marlboro but not giving up cigarettes. We're schizophrenic, I tell you. We're insane. The third response we have is, oh, there's poison. You know, you ate sugar, Robina. No, I did not. So we have guilt, blame, and denial. They're the three variations of ego's responses, and they're all ridiculous. So the fourth one, this one is practical, but it takes time to cultivate it. It takes courage to own the things we do that are negative. I mean, it's so hard. You'd think it'd be so easy. It is so painful because we are addicted to guilt, or we are addicted to anger. We are addicted to this view, you know, it's very deep inside us. But regret is such a powerful, wholesome, self-respectful attitude. So we've got to speak it out when we do the practice. There's no time to do it today, but we've got to speak it out when you say regret. I did. So when you sit down at the end of the day, you know, just do it in a very casual way. You're talking to yourself. You're being your own friend here. So, you know, by the end of the day, especially we have lots of contact with lots of people, these days a little bit less, or if you're living in a household right now and there's lots of dynamics, and you shouted and said the wrong thing, we get all contorted inside, don't we? So have your space and you sit down and you just check the things that have happened that day. It really demands a lot of clarity, you know. I'll make sure, I will send it, I promise, down there. I will send it, I promise. So, you check, okay, at 10 o'clock this happened, 11 o'clock this, and it's really hard because we're all tight inside and all caught up and guilty and ashamed. It's very hard to own it. It's very hard to state it. I did do this and I did do that and I did do this and I did do that. This clarity really helps. And then you say, and you're talking to yourself, you know, Robina, I did do these things. And you know what, I regret these things because I don't want the future suffering. This has to be the first step. It has to be compassion for ourselves. It takes time to have this. It's not guilt, it's not blame, it's not contorted, it's not exaggerating. It's intelligent and self-respectful and helpful. You've got to steady your mind. I did do those things and I regret this from the depths of my heart because I don't want future suffering. You have to spell it out. And if we miss, this is the same as the whole view of karma. If we miss this, our compassion can never be stable. We can never be stable. We've got to go through each of these stages of practice. This is already profound, you know. It's like kindness to yourself. So then, of course, if you're a proper little Buddhist, you then think, and whatever I've done since beginningless time to harm sentient beings with my body, speech, and mind, you know. Because why? Because they're going to ripen as my suffering. So these, you're regretting things you've done to harm others because it harms you. You are the recipient of this. You're the recipient of this attitude. And you've got to cultivate it with the words. It's kindness to yourself. This is a hugely important step. Not as I said, it's the most important, because if you don't do this one, you can't go further. So then the next step, naturally, if you've just taken poison, if you've just eaten sugar, you've got to go, oh my God, whom can I turn to? Whom can I rely upon to give me the antidote? This is the exact attitude. And so here, the second step is, when, you know, if we've got a Buddhist practice, we'll think of the Buddha. We'll think of our guru as the Buddha. So and we do this meditation, we visualize a particular aspect of the Buddha. So you'd imagine above your head, but really the attitude here, you take refuge, but the attitude is to be so delighted you found a decent doctor. So what's a doctor mean? Well, there are two things. This is what refuge is. Two things. You've got to know you don't want suffering. That's why you go to a doctor. Or you either want curative or preventative, isn't it? That's why you turn to a doctor. You don't go to a doctor because she's pretty. You go because she's got some knowledge that you want, the methods, the medicine. And the other one is, also you've got to have confidence as a valid doctor. So that if you've chosen Buddha, you've thought about Buddha, you've decided he's your doctor, and that's the attitude of refuge, not the attitude, this is a major difference again, not the attitude of if you have a faith in a creator. That's completely different. So when I'm a Catholic, I turn to God and I begged him to forgive me, because that's what purifies. This is not the Buddhism. You rely upon your doctor because she's got the methods. She doesn't forgive you. You do the work. You take the methods and you do the work. So the second one is like delighting. You've got a decent doctor, refuge. The second part of the second step, they also call it reliance. You now have compassion for those you've harmed. The first one is compassion for yourself. Now it's compassion for the others, and you want to regret for their sake. All these sentient beings whom I've harmed in the past, all the sentient beings today, the boyfriend, my mother, the rat, the ant, whatever. I must purify for their sake. This is compassion. And if you're brave enough here, you'd also have compassion for those who've harmed you. Why? Because they will suffer in the future. And if you can't go there yet, you don't go there. If you can, great. Third, the remedy. So there's a particular practice we do, visualizing this Buddha and then visualizing nectar coming. You're using your own mind, your own creative intelligence to imagine purifying. And because it's your mind, then that is what purification is. By wanting to purify, by imagining purifying, you actually purify. Your mind is what creates it. It's your mind visualizing. Your mind does it while you recite the mantra of Vajrasattva. Superpower. All the Tibetan lamas would say any practice that you utilizes the visualization of the Buddha or the recitation of their mantras is super, super powerful because of the power of enlightened beings. You know. The fourth step, Pabonka Rinpoche says this is the most important. This is the resolve to change. So if we have guilt, I'm a bad person, we can't go further. And we would never resolve to change because we're just set in stone. I'm a hopeless person and we love to hate ourselves. But this one is, again, a very profound one that says, okay, I'm going to make some decisions here. If your bad habit is to badmouth your mother, then you can't say, I'll never badmouth my mother again, because you know the habit is very deep. But first you've regretted it because you know you're sick of this habit, and you know you're sick of this habit. It's horrible. And then you have compassion for your mum in the next step. And then you do the purification. You visualize and say the mantra, and then you make some decisions. So if you don't make a decision to do something, you'll never do it. So you've got to say, okay, I can't say, but I'll never badmouth my mum again. But maybe you will vow before you go to sleep, okay, at least tomorrow I'll watch my speech like a hawk and I will not badmouth my mother for one day. And don't be surprised, you will keep your vow. It's the power of your own decision. This is purification. These 4 steps, nothing left. So, all this is in the notes I'll send you. So, these 4 ways, these 4 steps in purification also Each of them purifies one of the 4 ways that karma ripens. So I'll send this in the new notes, but I'll just say it to you now. The first one, regret, is very powerful, actually. If let's just say at work, you're having a hard time, okay? Someone's mean to you. And this is so common. Everybody in their life has this experience. People are mean to us, people at work, the people at the Buddhist center, unkind to us. We all know this experience. We get bad mouth. We feel not fair. We didn't do anything wrong. They're lying about us. They're saying we did this. They're saying we did that. This is the torture we all have. It's so painful. We know this one. Well, this is the point. If we take the view of karma, that someone's accusing me of doing something I didn't do, let's say, what we tend to do is obsessively try to get them to change their mind, try to prove to them I didn't do it, try to beg them to like us again, because the pain of not being liked is so bad. So regretting, so instead of that, you sit down at the end of the day and you decide, you go, okay, whatever I must have done in whatever past life that is now ripening as this person being mean to me, I regret that action from the depth of my heart. Because look, I know I don't want the result. Here is a result right now. You own responsibility for the fact that you caused it 47 lives ago, if you take the view of karma. So it shifts the emphasis on the self-pity. It shifts the emphasis from hoping they will change their mind and like you again. You get to the root of the problem, and don't be surprised if you do that every single day, that the situation begins to shift. Because regret purifies that kind of karma, the experiences similar to the cause. It takes courage to do this, but it's logical if we can think it through. So powerful. Next, refuge and compassion for others purifies environmental karma. So they say that the ground that you fall down on that hurts you is the very ground you rely upon to stand up. So like sentient beings, the very beings we've harmed in the past are the very ones we now want to rely upon to develop our compassion. So we want to help them. That can help shift, and that can help shift environmental karma, Even now, think of this, like I said before, all these sick people, we're not even allowed to touch each other right now. That's the direct environmental result of past killing, that touching another human being can kill you. This is unbelievable. It's like eating poison. It's unbelievable. It's fascinating. It's mind-blowing. Well, just have compassion. Compassion for all the sentient beings, Don't be surprised that you won't get COVID-19. Could you purify the causes? Third one, the remedy, visualizing, the mantra, so powerful. This purifies the lower realm results. And we haven't even talked about this much. Being born as an animal or a spirit or in the other suffering realms of existence. And the fourth one is obvious. The determination to change purifies the habit. So the 4 ways that karma ripens: the type of rebirth, the suffering ones are purified by the 3rd step. Your tendency to keep doing it, purified by the determination not to do it, 4th step. The experience happening to you, regret, purifies that. And the environmental result, the physical world impacting upon you, is purified by compassion and refuge. So it's a very integrated psychological practice, I tell you. And as I said, I'll send both the practice and the explanation. And I'll do some adjusted notes, and I'll send you those. I'll give them to Andrew. He can send them to you. So that's it. So have questions before we finish? I mean, we can go a bit longer if you like. I don't mind. Any questions, darling people, about this practice? Because it's very important. Any thoughts, questions, analysis, understanding, confusion? Anybody?
Robina,
Yeah.
it's Lorna. So do you just need to do that purification once, kind of per regret?
What do you mean?
Well, like I had my cat killed 4 years ago, had her put down, but as you say, I killed her. And
so go on then.
So So I do the purification practice on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do I just do it once?
Okay, it's not like that. It's that's an example of killing, and we have that. And so, first, your motivation was pure. You meant well, didn't you? So there wasn't that much negative karma in the first place. You meant well. Your pussycat might have gone a suffering life, but that's another discussion. But from your side, you did mean well, and that's a common thing. So that's just an example, though. If we can think of ourselves having done this even without realizing all the ants and the creatures, and we've harmed many, many creatures. So then we've got a tendency to kill in there, and we've got the karmic imprints from past killing. So we can take particular examples we do regret, which we know about, but then we can think of all the ones we've done like that. We want to purify all of them. So, it's not just once. I mean, it's not just one, but it's clear, though. The point is, the more we all know, the more effort you put into doing something, the more likely the result. So if you're trying to chop down a tree, just chopping it once is not going to be enough. But the stronger you chop it, the more often you chop it, the likely the tree is to come down. Same here. The stronger you have regret. As he says, the power of purification is the power of regret, the power of the compassion and refuge, the power of the antidote, and the power. So the stronger you do them every day, because we've got billions of karmic seeds and billions of actions every second, it's a general powerful antidote and keeps us steady, And then the more deeply we do it, it's just a part of our integrated daily practice in general about everything. It's like a pervasive kind of practice. And it's a very powerful, optimistic attitude. And also it increases compassion, And it powerfully puts atomic bombs under all the habits, all the tendencies, all the seeds. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lorna. Will that do? Are you there, Andrew? I can't find you anymore. Who's there in the center? I can't see anybody. Oh.
Venerable?
Who's
I have
that?
a question. Whitney.
Good, go, sweetheart. Talk to me.
So are you saying that purification practice should be part of our daily practice?
Yes.
Irrespective of our individual actions?
Yes, because we've got billions of seeds already in there from countless past lives and billions of seeds from today and other lives. I mean, we've got billions. We can take examples of certain actions, but the fact that we've got attachment, got aversion, got different things and habits in there, we want to put atomic bombs on all of them. It's like a very powerful psychological uplifting type of practice, purifying every day. Absolutely. Does it make sense?
Yes. Do you find it true that this takes a long time?